Chapter 703. Wuchen strode forward with his head held high. There was a heroic spirit surging between his brows. Even though this world had been disrupted by him, some general events were still unavoidable. For example, the Alabastan incident is still the same as before. The only change is that the Marine Admiral Cazares suddenly intervened. However, the distorted script only needs a little correction to return him to his original position. Long time no see, my fleet admiral. Without waiting for Sengoku to speak, Dustless joked. The person who contacted him using the Den Den Mushi was actually Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Sengoku, who was far away in Marin, was silent. He knew that Dustless was deliberately teasing him. He straightened out his thoughts and went straight to the point. Kizaru has rushed to Alabasta. I hope you can rush there too. Sorry, I don't have time. Without thinking, Dustless refused directly. Hearing this, Sengoku's eyes flashed with disappointment, and then he said to the Den Den Mushi, in that case, it's a pity, goodbye. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Dustless to reply, Sengoku hurriedly hung up the phone. This simple appearance made Dustless unable to react for a while, and he stood still like a stone. This guy is so free and easy for the first time. After a while, Dustless was surprised. When he refused other tasks before, Sengoku persuaded him. In Dustless's impression, Sengoku was the first time he was so straightforward. He didn't even bargain. Dustless frowned slightly. As the saying goes, there must be a demon if something is abnormal. Sengoku's behavior is so abnormal. There must be something wrong. It can't be as simple as it seems. Could it be that the old guy is testing me on purpose? Wuchen guessed with a shrewd look. This is the most likely. Sengoku is meticulous. The most terrible thing is not his strength, but his intelligence. Sengoku is known as the wise general by the world. After a while, Dustless shook his head slightly. Only Hancock knew about his relationship with Nico Robin. Hancock naturally wouldn't betray Dustless. Gather all your clones in Alabasta. Tell me immediately if there's any trouble. Although he didn't know what Sengoku was planning, Dustless still asked White Zetsu's clones to scatter all over Alabasta. Even if Sengoku's conspiracy was flawless, it couldn't escape his eyes. Speaking of which, how is Crocodile's search for the Nether King? Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. Hearing this, White Zetsu shook his head and told him everything. Deciphering the poneglyph is not a trivial matter. It requires a lot of time. I don't think Crocodile has made any substantial progress. He is still playing games with the Alabastan royal family. White Zetsu's tone was contemptuous. Crocodile was much more timid than before. It was estimated that he was scared by Dustless, so he became extremely low-key. It didn't take long for him to deal with the Alabastan royal army. He sighed and felt some sympathy for Crocodile. It was because Mariehua was brutally suppressed by Dustless that a shadow was left in his heart. He began to tuck his tail between his legs and live in the dark day after day. Over the years, he rarely heard any news about Crocodile. It's like he evaporated into thin air. All of this was thanks to Dustless. If he didn't deliberately distort Crocodile's mentality, maybe the kid would be happy to be a big thief now, and he wouldn't run to Alabasta, a country full of wind and sand. He even spent several years painstakingly gathering like-minded people from all sides, establishing a huge organization, and finally took the risk of collecting the devil child, Nico Robin, and looking for ancient weapons. White Zetsu knew that all of this was to retaliate against Dustless, for the shame that Dustless gave him. You are a man-made product. Why are you sighing, White Zetsu? Glancing at White Zetsu, Dustless's plain face showed defeat. I didn't expect that the things I created would sympathize with the enemy. Nowadays, the world is deteriorating. Dustless looked melancholy and emotional. I don't sympathize with him. I just pity Crocodile's naivety. White Zetsu shook his head. He knew Dustless well. Ancient weapons are legendary things. how can it be so easy to come out? In addition, if he really finds ancient weapons, I'm afraid that the effect will be unsatisfactory. It's unrealistic to expect Pluto to make a comeback. There was a sigh in his words, and White Zetsu's face was full of pity. The outside world didn't know Dustless's secret at all. White Zetsu, who inherited part of Dustless's memory, knew that the master was unfathomable and powerful. If you have to find a creature that can defeat Dustless, only the legendary god. Crocodile, don't worry about him, he's just a pawn. Monkey D. Luffy can deal with him. It is estimated that after defeating Crocodile, Luffy's bounty will increase again. It's just enough to annoy that old man Garp. Dustless laughed gloatingly. As for that guy Kizaru, he wants to capture Robin to work for the government. Dream on. A bright golden luster floated all over his body. Although it was warm, it was full of indescribable heat and destruction. It was terrible, as if it could destroy everything in the world. Carefully feeling it, it was actually the ability of the glint glint fruit, but different from before. The power was different, and there was a huge difference. Unlike Kizaru, Dustless's glint glint fruit had already reached the level of awakening. Chapter 704. In the cold and dark space, you can't even see your fingers, and there's a deadly depression. Here, it's several times more difficult to breathe fresh air than in other places. It's like a stone is stuck in your throat, and there's a feeling of suffocation. Creak, at this moment, the heavy metal door was easily pushed open by someone. This metal door that weighed several tons was like a toy. Immediately, a glaring light shone from outside the door. Endless cold fog drifted out of the metal door. Soon after, 3 figures came into view. Looking up, it was Dustless and White Zetsu. The other one was Caesar Kalang, who was responsible for helping Dustless build Pluto. I can't fight with Sengoku now, I can only find another way to make Kizaru go back home. Dustless didn't intend to do the task of stopping Kizaru himself. Long ago, he planned for today and prepared a lot of cards. What he was about to use now was one of the cards he prepared. If one looked around, they would discover that this dark and gloomy space was actually a large laboratory. Countless strange creatures were being cultivated here. In the past, after witnessing Vegapunk's scientific achievements, Dustless ordered Caesar to pay more attention to the study of the human body. With his support over the years, Caesar has made rapid progress. Looking up, looking straight at the largest container in front of him, Dustless's eyes were filled with expectation, and his pace became a lot faster. The special pool was filled with a green solution, and a floating man was clearly visible. He had long black hair, a handsome appearance, and there was no breath, no heartbeat, and it's not difficult to see that he's a dead man. However, even if his eyes were closed, his whole body exuded an indescribable temperament, and it was full of overbearingness. In front of him, he felt as small and powerless as an ant. This person is Uchiha Madara. Although he used to control Madara's body to fight Blackbeard, and at that time, he also fused with Dustless's cells. Although all aspects have recovered well, there are still flaws. All in all, at that time, it was just a last-minute preparation. Could it be that Lord Dustless wants to use Edo Tensei? White Zetsu muttered softly. Dustless resolutely shook his head when he heard this. He can use the Edo Tensei on anyone but Madara. This guy's ambition is monstrous. Even if he is dead, he is still a ghost. He longs to return from hell one day with an invincible posture and once again rule the world like a god. After pondering for a while, Dustless said resolutely, just make him into a heavenly axiom. In fact, Dustless still had the corpses of Hashirama and Tobirama. He could make them into one of the 6 paths, but thinking about Tsunade's feelings, he didn't want to do that. Tsunade was now treating him sincerely. If he turned her grandfather into a puppet, it would be too cruel. Besides, compared to Hashirama, Uchiha Madara wasn't bad. With a slight shift of thought, countless black iron rods appeared in his hands. This guy is my perfect test specimen. Do you want to ruin him like this? Looking at the iron rods in Dustless's hands, Caesar's face was full of reluctance and heartache. Although he didn't know what Dustless was doing, he was sure that he was using his precious test specimen for experiments. Uchiha Madara's body was given to Caesar by Dustless, and it took him several years to maintain the current state. Of course, it was also thanks to Dustless's cells that he was able to repair it so perfectly. You only dealt with the first few processes. The final processing process will be done by Dustless Sama. Turning his head and glancing at Caesar, White Zetsu said indifferently. He has always been respectful to Dustless, but for the other subordinates of Dustless, White Zetsu maintained equal status. Humph, the greatness of science, you know nothing. This is my perfect work. Seeing White Zetsu's arrogant look, Caesar shouted unhappily. White Zetsu just glanced at him, and then he was silent. He was created by Wu Chen, and he also inherited some of Wu Chen's personality. He was a man of few words and didn't like to talk nonsense. Especially with Caesar, who was a neurotic person, he had nothing to say. Pucci. The black iron rod was inserted into Madara's body, and it contained unimaginable power. Madara's lifeless body moved strangely. How is this possible? Caesar's eyes widened as he witnessed Madara's slightly twitching body, and he couldn't help but roar out loud. Shut up, I can't concentrate. Slightly squinting his eyes, the black iron rod in his hand appeared again, and once again, it went deep into Madara's body. This time, the location was the head. What's more strange is that Madara's eyebrows were slightly raised, and then under Caesar's stunned gaze, he opened his eyes. He's a zombie. Seeing this, Caesar screamed sharply, with a roar of steel. Is this guy the reincarnation of God? Can he bring people back from the dead? Caesar's body trembled, and his pupils expanded to the largest extent in his life. His eyeballs were even about to burst out of their sockets, and they were permeated with dense blood. You're the world's #1 scientist all day long, and you're so ignorant. White Zetsu took the opportunity to satirize. When it's time to hit the face, decisive counterattack. This is also a characteristic inherited from Dustless. Caesar, however, didn't care. He was panting like a cow, and his face was flushed. Caesar's eyes widened, and he stared at this unprecedented scene. He lost his mind like a child, quietly waiting for Dustless to perform a miracle. Chapter 705. These black iron rods were undoubtedly the tools used by Dustless to control Madara. They were created by Dustless's will, and without them, Madara couldn't be controlled. Oh. I'm afraid you never dreamed that one day you would be transformed into a puppet by me. Dustless looked at Madara with a smile on his face, and he couldn't help but sigh. Dustless suddenly remembered the young him in the past. At that time, he was just a pawn working for Madara. Looking back now, Dustless felt like he was in a dream. Even though he was 50 years old, every time he thought about it, he was still confused. So powerful, Caesar's eyes were shining, and the way he looked at Dustless changed dramatically. Before, it was just simple respect, but now it was like looking at a god. In his eyes, a human being with a mortal body would not be able to reach such a level. It's normal for Caesar to have such an idea. As a native of this world, he doesn't understand and has never seen chakra, a power that he has never been involved in. After a while, Madara was full of catheters, and under Caesar's surprised gaze, he finally stood up. It's the first time I'm using it, although it's not smooth. But it should be no problem to deal with Kizaru. Dustless said calmly. Kizaru was just an admiral of the marine, so it wasn't difficult to stop him. Dustless glanced at Caesar, who was fascinated and puzzled, and couldn't help but shake his head. Naturally, he understood what this old guy was thinking. This wasn't a product of science, but his will. It wasn't something that could be understood by the word science. Yin-yang release was beyond scientific knowledge. Plop, at this moment, with the sound of water flowing, Madara stood up from the pool, and his whole body was full of catheters. His whole body was expressionless, no different from a machine. Dustless wasn't an Uzumaki Nagato. Even though it was his first time using it, and he wasn't very proficient in some areas, he could still control Madara from a distance. 1 meter and 10,000 meters meant the same thing to him. He was not like Nagato, who sneaked up on Muyi and insisted on running near Muyi to strengthen his control of Heavenly Way. Mariewa only needed to control the Heavenly Axiom. As for the other 5, maybe Madara isn't enough, so it's better to test it on someone else, White Zetsu tentatively suggested. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at him faintly. Driving Kizaru away doesn't mean killing him. 1 Tendo is enough to deal with him. Caesar listened in confusion. He didn't understand the conversation between Dustless and White Zetsu, but he understood the general meaning. When these things were in their complete state, there should be 6 of them. Is it only perfect if there are 6 of them? Caesar's tone was doubtful. Although he didn't know the strength of this Uchiha Madara in front of him, one thing was certain. Something that Dustless personally made would definitely not be weak. And listening to Dustless's previous words, he wanted to use this thing to deal with Kizaru, who was a Marine Admiral. You're quite clever, White Zetsu joked. If he could find an opportunity, he wouldn't mind hitting Caesar. This guy relied on the fact that he built Hades for Dustless. He usually thought that he was superior and arrogant. Not to mention White Zetsu, even Doflamingo sometimes didn't put him in his eyes. Wu Chen's forces could be short of anyone, but Caesar could not be short of. Humph. Caesar looked at White Zetsu fiercely, and then asked with a face full of curiosity. This kind of thing, can you, no? Before Caesar's voice fell, Dustless directly said. He understood what Caesar meant. It was estimated that he wanted to ask what kind of thing the black conduit on Uchiha Madara's body was. In this world, not everything can be explained by science, and not everything can be evolved by science. This is the gap between strength. White Zetsu despised. The yin-yang release was mysterious and abnormal, beyond the world's understanding. Even Chakra didn't know what it was, so Caesar couldn't understand it. Caesar's face was red, and he stared at White Zetsu and said, "Science is omnipotent. The development of civilization, to a certain extent, can even bring people back from the dead." You're right. For Caesar's words, Dustless nodded in agreement. There is a saying that every profession has its own master, such as Hades, an ancient weapon crowned with the title of God, is a product of science and technology. It can't be underestimated, and it was made thousands of years ago. In short, there is no limit to everything, and there is no absolute. Everything has its own way, and when it evolves to the extreme, it will turn into something magical. Humph. Caesar looked at White Zetsu and gave him a look of exultation. He looked arrogant, and his excited expression was full of provocation. These 2 guys, seeing this scene, Wu Chen was speechless about these 2 buffoons who liked to bicker. Then, he swaggered away and left the dark laboratory. At the same time, Uchiha Madara quickly put on his clothes and walked out of the laboratory with a cold expression. For Crocodile, Dustless naturally wasn't interested in such a small character. The purpose of creating Uchiha Madara was to stop Kizaru. Otherwise, Robin would be caught by that wretched old man. Dustless also counted on Robin to be an undercover in the Straw Hat Pirates, so naturally, he couldn't do as Sengoku wished. In the future, when it comes to cleaning up the Marines, Tendo will do it. It will save me the trouble of doing it myself. With a gloomy smile, Dustless said. Although he was also an admiral of the Marine, his purpose was different from Sengoku's, so he couldn't let Sengoku do what he wanted. Chapter 706. As soon as he stepped out of the dark laboratory, an anxious figure came into view. The newcomer's skin was wheat-colored, with golden hair and fiery red feathers all over his body, exuding a gloomy and depressing atmosphere. The corner of his mouth outlined an elegant smile. Dustless recognized the person in front of him, or rather, in the whole world, only Doflamingo dressed like this. He is also Dustless's dedicated henchman. Many things are handled by him. For example, Doflamingo, who is over 40 years old this year, is at the level of an admiral and is quite powerful. At the moment, his face was full of anxiety and his brows were wrinkled. Obviously, something bad has happened. I heard that you have been living a good life these days. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first. Because Doflamingo is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, he alone controls the business of both the black and white side, and no one dares to stop Doflamingo, so his business is getting bigger and bigger. He has been living a good life in recent years and is very carefree. Dustless also turns a blind eye to this. Doflamingo secretly sells all kinds of firearms and a large number of artificial devil fruits. It is estimated that he has earned at least tens of billions of berries over the years. Of course, people like Dustless and Doflamingo have a diluted concept of money. It is just a number. The most important thing is that a large number of devil fruits and smuggled firearms can make the world chaotic. This is also the reason why Dustless indulges Doflamingo. Doflamingo's old face suddenly collapsed. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a worried face. He looked sallow and emaciated, and it wasn't hard to see that he had been unusually troubled recently. The side effects of the artificial devil fruit army formed by 100 Beast Kaido came out. He killed the subordinates I sent to accept berries and also shouted to expose me for selling fake goods. The artificial devil fruit that Doflamingo sold to Kaido was a defective product developed by Caesar. It has a lot of side effects. After a long time, it will drain a person's body and drain the host's own energy. It will not take long for the host to die of exhaustion. Selling fake goods. So what? You're making money out of nothing, Dustless said with a straight face. Anyway, there is no guilt in it, and the berry that Kaido sent was just ill-gotten wealth. That bastard, he said that he would inform the Marine headquarters about the news of me selling artificial devil fruit. Doflamingo gritted his teeth and roared. That old man is quite smart. Dustless nodded slightly, secretly praising Kaido's quick-wittedness. Privately developing artificial devil fruits was not a small crime, especially when Doflamingo sold it to the world's pirates, even the Revolutionary Army's troops, and some war-torn kingdoms. The world government would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. Even the Shichibukai could not bear the anger of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Selling the artificial devil fruit to the Yonko, 4 emperors, was not a joke. Ha ha ha. It's a trivial matter. If he wanted to tell the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and the Marine headquarters, what you did was already in broad daylight. Even if I cover up for you, it's useless. Dustless explained with a smile. Doflamingo was stunned. Indeed, since Kaido did not inform the government and the Marine, it means that there is still room for maneuver. It's estimated that he wants the real thing, not the previous fake products. Dustless's eyes flashed. His eyes were shining, as clear as water. Dustless naturally knew what Kaido's idea was. It was nothing more than to truly complete the artificial devil fruit. He did not expose Doflamingo, but quietly explained everything. After all, only Doflamingo has artificial devil fruit in the world, and Kaido does not want to lose this only source. How can that be? That guy is ambitious. If we give him the real devil fruit, he will definitely repay kindness with ingratitude in the future. He will use the artificial devil fruit to deal with us. This is supporting the enemy. Doflamingo struggled. He hated Kaido very much. Now that he wants to support the enemy, it's better to kill him. What about supporting the enemy? Look at the long term. Dustless said without changing his expression. Even if he gets the artificial devil fruit, Kaido will form a devil fruit army to attack the Marine and other pirates. For the time being, it will not be Dustless's turn. And funding Kaido to beat the Marine and other pirates, Dustless doesn't think there is anything wrong with it. This is also a disguised use. Using Kaido to weaken the strength of the pirates and the Marine will reduce the resistance when they rule the world in the future. What if that old guy doesn't know? You also know that the higher the status of a pirate, the more greedy they are. Doflamingo still struggled. Doflamingo had a bone-deep hatred for Kaido. Back then, he was beaten by Kaido until he was looking for his teeth on the ground. If it wasn't for Dustless arriving in time and saving him from the tiger's den, perhaps many years ago, Doflamingo would have already gone to the underworld to report. If that's the case, let him shut up forever. Behind Wuchen, Uchiha Madara's eyes shone with a cold light, and his whole body exposed an extremely powerful aura. His whole body's temperament was like an unsheathed sword, invincible, and extraordinarily overbearing and oppressive. It's obviously a dead body. How can it be? Doflamingo's face was full of horror. Looking at the long black hair of Uchiha Madara, he felt a heavy oppression, making his forehead uncontrollably break out in cold sweat, and his face involuntarily showed fear. Doflamingo felt a fatal threat from this man who was covered in all kinds of black iron rods. It was as if he had met his legendary natural enemy, which made him fearful and panicked. Chapter 707. On the blue sea, several battleships were moving quickly. Kizaru stood proudly on the ship, his mouth leisurely blowing smoke rings, his face relaxed, wearing huge glasses. His demeanor looked quite comfortable. Thinking of the comfortable and leisurely life now, Kizaru's depression also disappeared. It's really not easy to climb to this point. It took a lot of hard work, and now the rain is finally over. It's a sunny day in life. Although he's already half 100 years old, he's still young compared to some big pirates. Admiral Borsellino, we've been sailing for a night. Do you want to find an island to rest? At this moment, a military officer came to Kizaru and tentatively suggested. Looking around, the entire fleet's personnel were tired like dead dogs. Kizaru's eyes flashed with hesitation. Thinking of the importance of Nico Robin, he wanted to refuse directly. But then he looked around and saw everyone's weak appearance. He also knew that it's too much. After all, these were all ordinary Marines. There was a world of difference between their physique and the generals, as well as all other aspects. After about half a day of travel, Kizaru and the others came to a deserted island. It was quite desolate and there were no birds or beasts, but the size of the island was beyond imagination. A group of soldiers ran to the island to rest, and some even directly vomited. This group of young people is really useless. Seeing this scene, Kizaru couldn't help but shake his head. Compared with his humanoid weapon, all aspects are 1,000 miles away. The humanoid weapon, which is designed with Bartholomew as the basis, has now begun to be mass-produced. In order to prevent accidents, Kizaru brought a lot of them this time. It's just that these are machines, and they don't need to get off the ship, so they stay on the battleship. Kakaka, at this moment, on the shore of the nameless island, strange ripples suddenly splashed on the sea surface. It spread rapidly like a wave, and in an instant, it spread hundreds of meters away. Immediately, under everyone's gaze, several marine battleships slowly sank. Even with Kizaru's calm temperament, he was stunned. He looked at the scene in front of him with a surprised face, and immediately his wretched old face twitched. Although he didn't know what was going on, there was only one possibility for this strange supernatural imagination. They were attacked. You've got guts. A cold light emerged in his eyes. Kizaru wiped his glasses. His squinted eyes enlarged, emitting a dangerous light. His eyes looked straight into the depths of the sea, and immediately his whole body emitted a golden flash. His whole body gradually collapsed, losing its texture, and a large number of photons all floated to the clouds. Using the characteristics of the glint fruit, Kizaru was able to float in the air for a short period of time. In just a few seconds, he was able to condense extremely dense flashes of light. The dazzling narrow light pulsed in Kizaru's palm, covering a surprisingly large area. Kizaru knows that the ship has sunk and there is no possibility of salvaging it, which means that the mission has failed. If they don't catch the culprit, Sengoku will inevitably scold them. Yasakani no Magatama, the densely packed golden light bullets poured down like ants, swallowing the entire sea in an instant. The sinking warship was instantly smashed into pieces. Bang, 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 the earth trembled violently, raising smoke and dust that covered the sky. Looking straight ahead, there were more than a dozen shadows in the hazy smoke and dust, all of them escaped from the Navy's sunken warship. However, in the face of Kizaru's exaggerated attack, he didn't care about them. Whiz whiz whiz, the golden light bullets were mighty, annihilating everything in the world. Even if the warship was disintegrated, the raging golden light bullets did not stop attacking, but went straight to the dark shadow in the depths of the sea. Under the perception of observation haki, Kizaru clearly perceived the location of the dark shadow. Smart. The mysterious dark shadow on the bottom of the sea raised a playful arc, looking at the light bullets that were about to hit him into a sieve. His face with a black catheter swept a sneer. Bang! At the bottom of the sea, it was as if he was on land, ignoring the gravity of the sea and jumping out of the sea. This guy. Who the hell is he? He can float in the air. Kizaru's eyes widened, and his dry mouth was round. He asked himself that he had fought countless pirates in his life and witnessed countless strange abilities, but it was the first time he saw someone who could fly out of thin air. Quietly staring at the dark shadow in the sky, Kizaru keenly smelled an unprecedented danger. He put away his sloppy appearance and flipped through the information in his mind, but he had never seen or heard of this character. Looking up, the mysterious man's back was facing Kizaru. He could only see his side, his long black hair dancing in the wind, wearing black gloves, wearing red armor. His whole body was filled with a cold breath of decay. The invincible momentum and the spirit of despising all things made Kizaru stunned. Ah! Such an arrogant guy is really rare, Kizaru said in a frivolous tone. Even so, Borsellino's face flashed with cold light. He was a marine admiral, but the mysterious man in front of him seemed to treat him as an ant, as worthless as a cabbage on the roadside. Whiz whiz whiz, at this moment, there was a violent vibration in the smoke, and there were as many as a dozen pacifists, big mouths, and dangerous eyes condensed in their mouths. The source of this trick was Kizaru's laser, of course, because it was not his body, it was much weaker. Naive, at this moment, the mysterious man in the sky suddenly turned his head, revealing a purple eye, with a wicked smile on the corner of his mouth, staring at the roaring flash, the corner of his mouth slightly opened. Will Grave, Border Prison. Chapter 708. There is no doubt that this strange dress, the only person in the world who has Rinnegan and can use the unparalleled ninjutsu like Luin Tomb, Border Prison, is Uchiha Madara, who was made into Tendo by Dustless. There is no one else. Luin Tomb, Border Prison. As Uchiha Madara's voice fell, the void suddenly burst, a violent turbulence, and energy fluctuations visible to the naked eye rapidly expanded and extended, annihilating the light beam in an instant. Even the clouds floating in the void were eroded and erased due to the overbearing power of this attack. This guy actually broke the pacifista's laser in one go? Kizaru's tone was surprised, and even because of the incredible reason, his mouth trembled slightly, and the whole person lost his usual calmness. He understood the power of the pacifista. Especially the laser of the laser, which is his glinting fruit. Kizaru naturally understands its power. Even if a pirate with a bounty of more than 100 million berries is hit, he will be killed in seconds. Tell me your name. Kizaru was not angry, his voice was very soft, but it gave a kind of pleasant feeling. The whole person was like the grandfather next door. All in all, Kizaru at this moment gave people a very strange feeling, and even the marine on the side was puzzled. Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara looked at Kizaru with his hands crossed in front of him. Tendo Uchiha Madara raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and then his lips opened slightly, calmly saying his name. Uchiha Madara? Kizaru, who had never heard of this name, frowned, and his mentality that had not been angry for many years flashed anger, and there was always an unknown fire burning in his heart. He didn't know why, but he always felt that Uchiha Madara's every move and every word was full of contempt, as if nothing in the world could be reflected in his eyes. Kizaru, this kid is smart. Dustless, who was far away in Mariewa, laughed. Others may not know what Kizaru meant, but he understood very well that Kizaru actually stretched out his intention to win him over. After all, Uchiha Madara has no bounty, and his strength is not bad. If he can be pulled into the marine, it will be a blessing. The idea is beautiful, but the reality is really cruel. The mission is complete. It's time to retreat. Completely ignoring Kizaru, Uchiha Madara showed everyone his back. His simple appearance made everyone stunned. Kizaru and the others felt worse than eating 10 pounds of flies. In front of this man, they were all insignificant pawns. You want to leave? How can I explain this to Sengoku? After several provocations, Kizaru's heart was as calm as an ancient well. His flame index also increased. His face was cold, and he immediately turned into a golden photon and whizzed out. The sharp whistling sound in the air made one's scalp tingle. Such a big formation. Do you think that I wouldn't notice you and purposely go easy on you? Uchiha Madara's footsteps stopped as he noticed the loud noise behind him. He muttered to himself as he formed a seal with both hands. In just a blink of an eye, a simple earth release ninjutsu was completed. Earth escape, earthquake core. The earth behind Uchiha Madara trembled, and a solid earth wall instantly condensed, separating Kizaru and Uchiha Madara. How can such a scam work? With a sneer on his face, Kizaru's hand suddenly condensed the outline of a golden sword. Kusanagi Cloud Sword. It was a divine sword that could cut through iron as though it was mud. The sharpness of the sword was enough to cut through meteorites. The blazing heat that emanated from the sword was something that no one dared to underestimate. As long as one came into contact with it, they would be melted into nothingness by the blazing heat. Kacha. The wall that rose from the ground was penetrated by the flash of light, and then shattered with a bang. Please go to the Marine headquarters with this old man, otherwise. Kizaru's words stopped abruptly as the blazing temperature hit his face. He looked up and saw a giant fireball roaring in front of him. Due to its terrifying power, the ground was scorched yellow, and hideous cracks appeared. It was no different from a riverbed that had been dry for several years. In an instant, it swallowed Kizaru and passed through his body. So strong, looking at the fireball penetrating his body, Kizaru couldn't help but take a deep breath. Perhaps if he didn't launch his elemental transformation ability at the last moment, he would have been seriously injured. This guy. What kind of ability is he? Paramecia? It shouldn't be. Logia? It doesn't seem to be. Kizaru carefully looked at Tendo Uchiha Madara, and his clear mind fell into a dead end. It was the first time he met such a tricky enemy. However, thinking of his huge advantage, Kizaru's old face changed faster than flipping a book. The biggest advantage of the glinting fruit is its terrifying speed and powerful strength. With a golden luster, Kizaru completely ignored the distance. In less than a blink of an eye, Kizaru jumped close to Uchiha Madara. Dustless, who was far away in Mariewa controlling the heavenly axiom, just smiled indifferently and was unprecedentedly calm. Speed is power. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? The voice of the vicissitudes of life rang in Uchiha Madara's ears, and he looked at Kizaru's calf that had condensed a dazzling light. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara just smiled disdainfully, and the black ball that had quietly condensed in his hand was thrown into the sky. Gravity is the natural enemy of everything. Even light is no exception. Have you ever been swallowed by gravity? Admiral Borsellino. Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 709. The black sphere in the sky looked harmless and small enough to be ignored, but what frightened Kizaru was that his whole body was out of control. Instinctively, he wanted to turn into a flash of light and slip away, but the deadly gravity made him afraid to take risks, and an inexplicable voice in his heart warned him not to elementalize. Ka ka ka, the earth kept trembling and jumping, like a swamp, extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. He didn't know how long it took, and finally, the earth, which could not withstand this gravity, burst open, and a huge gap appeared. The ground was easily torn apart by the penetrating gravity of Chibaku Tensei, leaving a terrible gap. Could it be that? What a joke! For the first time in his life, Kizaru's eyes showed panic. Under this boundless gravity, he couldn't move an inch. His body was invisible, as if he was carrying a mountain without a physical body, and breathing was 100 times more difficult than usual. He vaguely understood Uchiha Madara's intention to use the small black sphere as the core to form an unprecedented giant meteorite. No, I'm just sitting there waiting for death. The hesitation in his eyes turned into determination as he stared at the sphere in the sky that was about to swallow the world. Kizaru was scared, and the void was obviously changing. The terrifying gravity could even distort space and time. Once he was taken in by that thing, he couldn't do anything even if he tried his best. Without thinking, his body directly turned into a photon and whizzed out. What can you do under the gravity of Chibaku Tensei? Dustless, who was far away in Mariewa, sighed helplessly. Light was attracted by gravity. If Kizaru had been prepared in advance, he could have escaped, but he was unaware that he had been covered by gravity and was destined to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei. The elementalized Kizaru not only did not escape the swallowing of Chibaku Tensei, but he was also quickly crushed by Chibaku Tensei. At the moment when he was about to be crushed, a little crystal mist suddenly appeared in the air. This is ice dregs? Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Madara, was puzzled as he caught the falling crystal transparent body. Boom boom boom. The void flashed with a dazzling fire, and the broken walls immediately fell under the pull of gravity. Tendo Uchiha Madara turned his head slightly, and the figure behind him was looming in the smoke and dust. Rinnegan rippled. Far away in Mariewa, Dustless's doubts also disappeared. No wonder Sengoku called to deliberately test me, it turned out to be for this reason. It's a pity that he didn't wait for me, but he waited for Uchiha Madara. Dustless gloated with the corner of his mouth slightly raised. It's really unfortunate to meet two admirals, Tendo Uchiha Madara said with a headache. Others couldn't see the blurred reflection in the dust, but Uchiha Madara could see it clearly. His tall body was nearly 3 meters tall, not far from Kizaru's height. I don't hear any regret or misfortune in your tone. Please at least tell us your purpose for attacking the navy out of nowhere. At least we can give the fleet admiral an explanation. Akiji walked out of the smoke with a lazy face, his expression was sloppy, but his voice was extremely cautious. Before this, how did you know the weakness of Chibaku Tensei? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara asked with interest. Hearing this, Akiji shook his head and shrugged. It turned out to be Chibaku Tensei. Its power is as arrogant as its name. It's not a weakness. I was just taking a gamble. I couldn't just sit there and wait for death, so I directly attacked the black sphere. As for whether I could save Borsellino or not, it would depend on his luck. But now, it seems like I made the right bet. Uchiha Madara heard this and nodded sincerely. The weakness of Chibaku Tensei was to attack the black sphere before it was formed, so Chibaku Tensei would collapse by itself. At the same time, golden photons condensed around Akiji. At first, it was a little bit, and then gradually increased, converging into a tall figure with the word, justice, clearly visible behind the white cloak. It was Admiral Kizaru, but because of the demonic scene just now, his face was a little pale and bloodless, and he was still in shock. Presumably, it was the first time Kizaru had experienced such a horrible scene in recent decades. It's really unpredictable. The person I was waiting for didn't come, but it seems that I'm waiting for a more powerful person. Really, why are powerful enemies always on the opposite side of the marine? By the way, you haven't returned to the purpose of attacking the marine, Akiji asked while looking at Uchiha Madara's eyes. Dustless Mariewa's mouth curled into a smug smile. The person he was waiting for didn't come, he was afraid that he was talking about him, but unexpectedly, he was waiting for Uchiha Madara. Reason? What reason do you need? When a pirate meets a marine, or a marine meets a pirate, what reason do you think is needed to fight? What other reason do you think is needed? Facing the two admirals, Uchiha Madara replied calmly. His plain tone was exactly the same as the dialogue between ordinary people, maintaining calmness. In the eyes of Kizaru and Akiji, it was very strange. Don't say that they met two admirals at the same time, even if they met one of them, the pirates often fled without fighting. Be careful, this guy is very evil, Kizaru said cautiously. What kind of ability does he have? Akiji asked, thinking of Madara's ability. Hearing this, Kizaru's face suddenly stiffened, and he shook his head with a pale face, and then said in a half-joking, half-serious tone, maybe in the future, there will be more devil fruit, and the ability user himself is this guy named Uchiha Madara. Chapter 710. Hearing Kizaru's words, Akiji's face changed slightly. Perhaps Kizaru was exaggerating, but he is also one of the most powerful people in the Marine headquarters. For Kizaru to say such words, it can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Madara is. Akiji was a little more wary of Madara. This yellow monkey is quite clever and has rich combat experience. He deserves to be a Marine admiral. Dustless, who was far away in Mariewa, nodded secretly. He just tried to use armament haki, and it was easy and simple. Strangely, he couldn't control Uchiha Madara to use armament haki. It was the same as the original Naruto world. Dustless used the body of elephant turn technique, but he couldn't launch the ability of glint fruit. It's probably because of the different power systems of the two worlds. Uchiha Madara didn't touch armament haki, but it doesn't matter. Shaking his head, Dustless instantly understood the reason. His deep eyes were extraordinarily wise and confident. Even if Uchiha Madara doesn't use haki, if it wasn't for Akiji, the battle might have ended. It's strange that he can't use armament haki, but in any case, we have a great advantage. Akiji's surprise turned into relief. He never thought that Uchiha Madara wouldn't be able to use haki. This way, the odds of winning are much greater. Logia users are the natural enemies of those who can't use haki. As soon as Akiji's voice fell, Uchiha Madara sneered. Arrogant words? A natural enemy of mine? So what if you don't use haki? Do you think I can't do anything to you too? His body full of black iron rods was oppressive and terrifying. In the dark, Uchiha Madara seemed to be emitting black gas behind him. Combined with the strange eyes, he was like a death god coming out of the underworld. It's actually very simple to deal with Logia. You don't necessarily need armament haki, other abilities will do. His hands quickly printed, and Uchiha Madara's mouth curved. If you dare to use the elements, you can try it. This guy is really arrogant. With a snort, Akiji's eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time, Uchiha Madara's hand print was completed, and an endless sea of fire spewed out of his mouth. Fire style, grand fire annihilation. Scorching hot flames that almost covered the entire sky came rushing over in a grandiose manner. This unprecedented scale covered the sky and covered the earth. Even the sky was dyed a deep red, and the scene was extremely spectacular. Kizaru calmly elementalized, and so did Akiji. However, in the next second, Akiji ended his elemental transformation and revealed his original body. His old face was tense and looked a little depressed. What's wrong? You don't dare to elementalize? Uchiha Madara teased. Akiji's expression was within his expectations. Kizaru narrowed his eyes and looked at the melted water droplets under Akiji's feet. He then looked at the hot environment around him. Kuzan's body is melting. His attributes are restrained. Kizaru Janwei said as he recalled the black sphere. Sometimes, the suppression of one's celestial attribute was even more terrifying than domineering. Akiji's old face was gloomy. Fortunately, he reacted in time and ended his elemental transformation. Otherwise, his body that had turned into ice would have been directly evaporated by the monstrous fire. Ice Aeon. He leaped up and shot out long and narrow icicles from his arms. Kakaka, countless ice dregs extended from the ground, and the earth was instantly frozen. Immediately, it rose violently and turned into an iceberg of more than 10 meters, trying to block the fire. Fire can restrain water, but water can also restrain fire, and even has an advantage. Tomb of Samsara, border prison. His eyes were filled with ripples, and then in Madara's sight, several shadows flew out quickly. Each of them had infinite power and looked no different from Uchiha Madara. Kakaka. The majestic ice mountain was instantly smashed by the shadows, and the sea of fire swept out and swallowed Akiji in an instant. The boundless sea of flames swept down with monstrous momentum. Everywhere it passed, it was a complete mess. The ground was roasted to an unbearable state. Hideous cracks appeared on the ground, and the earth was slowly cracking apart. This armament hockey is really a headache. Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly. Nonsense, even if you feel a headache, at least show some embarrassment. Your acting is really bad. Admiral Kizaru took a cigarette and said sarcastically. In the sea of fire, Akiji stood tall and straight like a mountain. However, this Akiji was not that Akiji. His whole body was as black as ink, and even deeper than ink, shining in the sea of fire. Madara's eyes passed through the thick sea of fire, and Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, came into view. Every inch of his skin turned into hard steel, resisting the erosion of the flame. Dustless, who was controlling Madara and Mariewa, was calm, and felt that this scene was very normal. Armament hockey is a universal skill in this world. Virgo, as a vice admiral of the Marine, can be fully armed. There is no reason why Akiji, as an admiral, can't do this. Moreover, he was better than Virgo in every aspect. This feeling is really uncomfortable, looking around at the blazing sea of fire, even because the fire was too fierce, it burned on Akiji's whole body, and the hot temperature was enough to evaporate everything. Akiji, who was in armament hockey, looked cold. As long as he was elementalized, he was afraid that he would be annihilated on the spot. Akiji's heart was filled with unspeakable grievances. Being forced to such a point by a person who could not use armament hockey, Akiji felt bad luck and helplessness, and at the same time, there was fire in his heart. Chapter 7:11. Water and fire were naturally two opposite attributes. The moment the fire appeared, Akiji felt uncomfortable all over, as if he was going to be melted. His body kept sweating. Water can restrain fire, and fire can restrain fire. In the end, who can restrain who and who is better depends on the level of strength. You seem to have forgotten the existence of this old man. Kizaru's calf condensed a powerful flash, and the dazzling light could burn human eyes, making people not dare to look directly at it and instinctively close their eyes. Lightspeed kick. With Kizaru's voice fell, a straight ray of light shot out, cutting through the void, and in the blink of an eye, Uchiha Madara was swallowed. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara still held his hands in front of him and didn't hide. His purple pupils splashed with ripples, and his shadow immediately responded. Boom boom boom, a harsh explosion sounded out of thin air, and the earth trembled, followed by a huge fireball rising into the air, and the blazing impact spread out. On the ground where Uchiha Madara stood, a clear scorched black hole came into view. Even if you don't die, you'll lose a layer of skin, Kizaru said calmly while blowing smoke rings. The power of Lightspeed Kick is amazing, and it can even destroy a mountain and tear a huge crack in the solid earth. The consequences can be imagined if a human body withstands it. Is that so? Then you're doomed to be disappointed. In the black smoke of burning flames, a figure loomed, and the burning flames around him tried to swallow him, but they were crushed like candles in the wind. In the flames, Uchiha Madara was cold, and every time he took a step, the burning flames would gradually extinguish and collapse. Boom! With the last footstep falling, Uchiha Madara stepped out of the flames intact. This guy, impossible, I just hit him head on. Kizaru frowned and said with a tone of disbelief. The mystery of Tomb of Reincarnation, Border Prison, is mysterious, and you ordinary people will never understand it. Uchiha Madara's face remained cold as he said indifferently. Is it possible that my kick missed? Impossible. Looking at the intact Uchiha Madara, Kizaru's face was strange. At this time, Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, also came to Kizaru. I don't think so. Something seemed to have blocked the attack for him. Akiji guessed. He had been observing Uchiha Madara's movements. The moment he was attacked, the flash exploded in advance, and it didn't hurt Uchiha Madara's body. You guys are quite smart. Tendo Uchiha Madara couldn't help but look at Akiji with admiration. One was probing the enemy from the front, while the other was secretly observing the enemy's every move. Their coordination was flawless. These two guys are good. It seems that in the past few decades, the strength of the three admirals has progressed rapidly. Dustless, who was far away in Mariewa controlling Tendo Uchiha Madara, sighed. The admiral's combat experience is extremely rich. Akiji and Kizaru joined the marine when they were 20 years old. Now the youngest of them, Akiji, is nearly 50 years old. They have been fighting pirates for 30 years. 30 years of rich experience, as well as combat experience, is not a joke, especially when it comes to devil fruit ability users. Some ability users have never heard of or seen before. Therefore, the Admiral's adaptability is extremely strong. Although they are extremely surprised by Uchiha Madara's ability, they still remain calm. It seems that it's time to retreat. There's no need to entangle with the two of them. The mission is completed. Dustless pondered. His trip was just to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Now that their battleship has sunk, it means that there is no means of transportation. When they arrive at Alabasta, maybe Robin will have joined the Straw Hat Pirates and left. Want to go? If I let you go so openly, how will I explain it to Fleet Admiral Sengoku? Kizaru's eyes reflected a cold light, and he immediately waved his hand with great momentum. Like a sculpture of a pacifist, he moved side by side to block Uchiha Madara. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. No one can stop me if I want to go. Not to mention the two of you, even if the Marines' top battle powers gather together, they won't be able to do it. The void vibrated, ripples visible to the naked eye, and a strong repulsive force expanded. Uchiha Madara mobilized a large amount of chakra, and there was even a little blood in his eyes. The whole person was particularly terrifying. This state was no different from an erupting volcano, full of indescribable danger. Super Shinra Tensei. The whole island trembled violently, and the high-density chakra in the body erupted. The impact was as vast as the ocean, and the earth under Uchiha Madara's feet was directly wiped out. Akiji and Kizaru were fine. Both of them were extraordinary, and their observation haki and armament haki were unparalleled. Although they were affected, they escaped the fatal surprise attack. However, the pacifist was not so lucky. Ka. The pacifist's body suddenly cracked under the impact. Even if their skin was as hard as iron, it was difficult to guarantee that they would survive. Their bodies were torn apart by the boundless force, revealing various mechanical parts. That Vegapunk is worthy of being a peerless genius. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed, and his anger converged. Although the modified pacifista's stats weren't as good as the original Bartholomew Bear in all aspects, its body's hardness had increased by quite a bit. The special materials used to construct the pacifista were obviously not ordinary. Chapter 712. As far as the eye could see, the entire central area of the island had suffered an unprecedented impact. The earth had been flattened. The island had suffered a direct impact from the Super Shinra Tensei. The devastated island was a shocking sight, and the giant craters were obvious. This extremely large area of effect attack left everyone dumbfounded. Not only that, the exaggerated destructive power was unforgettable. The entire terrain of the island was rewritten by this unprecedented attack. Kuzan. Are you sure the opponent we are fighting is really human? Kizaru's face was covered with dust. At this moment, he looked like an old man who hadn't taken a bath for many years. This should be, maybe. Not only Kizaru, but even Akiji had doubts. The answer sounded ambiguous. Such a large-scale attack was beyond imagination, and the two of them were fortunate enough to follow Garp and Senshi Sengoku to fight against the legendary Pirate King, Gold Roger. Roger, who was almost deified by the world, may not be able to make such a shocking attack. One move almost destroyed the entire island. Anyway, It is necessary to investigate the origin of this guy, otherwise, we can't complete the task. Kizaru flicked the dust and lit a cigarette. Hearing this, Kazan nodded in agreement and stared at Tendo Uchiha Madara, who was covered with black tubes, with a frozen face. Let's go together. The moment Kizaru's voice fell, he disappeared. Looking at the fragments of the Kazuchiha Madara crushed like ants, his old eyes flashed with disapproval. These simple machines can be mass-produced as many as you want. Yasakani no Magatama. Knowing the strength of Uchiha Madara, Kizaru chose to be cautious. He waved his hand and used his most powerful move. Dark blue light erupted. Unlike the golden giant Dustless's body, a blue skeleton rose from the ground and defended Uchiha Madara. Kensusanu. With Uchiha Madara's low voice, the dark blue light turned into a real one. Clang. 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 Kensusanu was swallowed in the blink of an eye. Because the light was too strong, it covered the dark blue luster of Kensusanu and dyed it golden. Ka ka ka, in the swallowed Kensusanu, the sound of bones cracking could be faintly heard. It seems that you are not invincible. Like I said, God is fair to everyone. Kizaru said calmly as he tasted the rich tobacco in his mouth. Following his gaze, the dark blue skeleton gradually collapsed. Let me give him a boost. Qingji revealed a stern expression. Both of his eyes were as sharp as a blade. Icy cold air gathered on his right arm and quickly formed a large exquisite ice sculpture. Ice, stormy pheasant beak. A huge ice bird condensed in an instant, flapping its wings vigorously, sending out a piercing cold wind, and with a powerful impact, it swept towards Uchiha Madara. The cold and gloomy air emanating from his body could freeze time and space. Ka ka ka, at the same time, the impenetrable Susanoo that protected Uchiha Madara finally couldn't withstand the erosion of the light, and it shattered with a bang. Whoosh! The cold wind blew. The cooperation between Kizaru and Akiji was quite close. At the moment when Kensusano collapsed, the ice bird condensed by Akiji roared and instantly froze Uchiha Madara into a shining ice sculpture. Under the illumination of the sun, it was extraordinarily beautiful and full of artistic feeling. This monster is finally locked in a cage. His tight heart relaxed, and Akiji breathed a sigh of relief. His slightly tired old face also regained its luster. What an unexpected disaster, I was forced into such a mess by a guy with no bounty. Really, how come there are more and more monsters in this world? Looking at himself, Kizaru couldn't help but complain. Looking up, there were many scorched holes in Kizaru's clothes, all thanks to Uchiha Madara. Contact the fleet admiral, the battleship has been completely destroyed by him, we can only send someone to pick up. Ka ka ka, Akiji's voice didn't fall, and the ice that froze Uchiha Madara made a crisp roar, and many cracks could be clearly seen on the surface of the ice. Could it be that this guy is still moving? Akiji's eyes were filled with cold light, and he didn't hesitate to touch the ground with his hands, and the whole earth was instantly swallowed by the ice. Ice Age. The more piercing ice swallowed Uchiha Madara, and the broken ice all over his body healed and solidified again. Compared to the previous ice bird, this Ice Age was undoubtedly more terrifying. He has such a strange ability, maybe it's really like what you said. I don't know when an all-rounder like him will appear. Thinking of Uchiha Madara's dazzling ability, Akiji couldn't believe it. All-rounder? So what? In front of justice, even if he's invincible, he has to stretch his neck and accept the punishment. Kizaru flicked the ash off his cigarette and said lightly. I say, are you two mistaken? Do you think that's the real me? At this moment, a ghostly voice came from behind Kizaru and Akiji. What you see may not be true. What you painstakingly deal with is actually just my shadow. Do you think you're winning? Are you Marines so naive? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara with various black tubes all over his body mocked. He touched his chin indifferently, and the sharpness in his eyes converged. Damn it. This tone, and this expression, why do I feel so familiar? Kizaru's old face was full of puzzlement, and he seemed to have an impression of Uchiha Madara's speech and behavior. What kind of ability is it? Forget it, for the time being, you're an all-rounder. Akiji's doubts were instantly relieved, and he was no longer entangled. After capturing this guy alive, all the puzzles will be solved. At the same time, the ice that froze Uchiha Madara also shattered, but there was no one inside. Originally, I had wanted to simply leave. However, it would appear that if I don't teach you two brats a lesson, you two won't let me leave unscathed. Tendo Uchiha Madara's voice became indifferent, and at the end of his words, he disappeared. So fast. Seeing Tendo Uchiha Madara disappear in an instant, Kizaru and Kazan immediately used their observation haki to perceive Tendo Uchiha Madara. TSK. Let me see how much you, three great generals, have grown. Dustless Mariehua's face was full of playfulness, and he suddenly found that his boring life was a lot happier, and then he seriously controlled Uchiha Madara's movements. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. At first, it was still not too familiar. But along with the passage of time, Dustless already became more and more proficient in using heavenly Dao spots. Found it. With a cold light in his eyes, his observation haki captured Uchiha Madara's murderous intent, and the air around his body quickly froze and turned into several sharp spears. Ice, double thorn spear. Aiming in the direction of Uchiha Madara, it immediately whistled out mercilessly. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed slightly, and he noticed the ice spears shooting towards him. His sunken eyes rose, his hands slightly opened, and a perfect defensive circle suddenly formed. Shinra Tensei. The 360-degree defense was watertight, protecting Uchiha Madara. The space was tightly sealed, and even the air was isolated. Bang bang bang, Shinra Tensei was enough to defend against most physical attacks, and the ice spears were easily bounced off and penetrated deep into the soil. The sharp spears were hard to imagine, and they directly cut the ground. A normal human would have been sliced in half with just a light slash. Laser. A large number of photons condensed at the tip of his thumb, and the shining light made people unable to open their eyes, and immediately rushed out, swallowing Uchiha Madara. Seeing this, Tendo Uchiha Madara just didn't care about it. The void in front of him slowly distorted, showing a strange vortex shape. Kamui. The powerful roar fell, and the vortex-shaped space turned into a bottomless black hole, easily swallowing the gorgeous light beam. Seeing this, Kizaru suddenly froze, and immediately realized that Uchiha Madara was approaching. He was about to elementalize, but suddenly remembered the terrible gravity before, and immediately cancelled the plan. His right arm glowed with golden light, and a sharp sword condensed in an instant. Clang! The empty space suddenly had a spark, and immediately saw two figures flashing out of thin air. Uchiha Madara, holding a black iron stick in his hand, easily blocked Kizaru's attack. Don't forget me. Akiji attacked from behind, holding an ice sword in his hand, and used all his strength to stab Uchiha Madara's head. You are too careless, I never said that I would fight alone. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara turned his head to look at Akiji, and the corner of his mouth swept with a gloomy smile. His eyes rippled, and a very dangerous wave quietly spread. At this moment, time seemed to stop. Will grave, border prison. Akiji's expression suddenly solidified, and the hair on his body stood up uncontrollably. He remembered Uchiha Madara's strange trick before, and his face was full of determination. Instinctively, he smelled ominous and dangerous. Busashoku hardening. In an instant, his whole body turned into black steel, strengthening his own defense. Boom! When the sharp ice spear was about to pierce Uchiha Madara, Akiji's right face was hit by a strong attack, and his whole body flew upside down and hit the ground heavily. And you? His eyes then turned to Kizaru, and his pupils once again swayed with a dangerous light. Boom! With Akiji as an example, although Kizaru had been carefully prepared, he still couldn't avoid the same fate. His abdomen was hit hard, and he was hit by a powerful force. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't see it, but in Uchiha Madara's sight, there were as many as 5 shadows protecting him. Damn bastard, you don't know how to respect the old. Kizaru stood up awkwardly, and his heart was extremely sullen. It's not that he didn't want to elementalize, but Uchiha Madara's method of suppressing his attributes was too terrible. Thinking of the previous experience, Kizaru's scalp was numb. Once controlled by the ghost called Chibaku Tensei, he was afraid that he would live in a meteorite for the rest of his life. Akiji's old face was also ugly. He didn't dare to elementalize easily. If he was caught, he would be directly evaporated by Uchiha Madara's hot flame. Therefore, Kizaru and Akiji could only rely on Busashoku Haki to resist. Although they would be attacked, the risk was much smaller. One wrong step, and they may fall. Now you should know what you and I are aware of. Uchiha Madara glanced at the two and whispered. Kizaru and Akiji looked at each other and still refused to give up. There was no other reason except that the admirals who died in battle had never been heard of escaping from pirates. Otherwise, they would have no face to return to the marine headquarters. This unequal war didn't end until late at night. Uchiha Madara still left safe and sound. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't stop him at all and could only watch. Dustless naturally wouldn't waste time with Kizaru and Akiji, because this was originally to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Destroying their battleship was actually the end of the matter. However, Kizaru and Akiji refused to let go, so he could only fight. I guess there will be a bounty tomorrow, staring at the sea in the distance, Dustless said calmly. His performance was unusually indifferent, which was inevitable. Chapter 713. The bounty on a pirate is not only based on his own strength, but also an estimate of his future potential. Making the most comprehensive analysis, if the pirate is too dangerous, the marine may immediately destroy their high-end combat power. However, as for Uchiha Madara, it is estimated that no one can destroy him. Time passed unknowingly, and 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. On the magnificent sea, huge ripples appeared. Looking as far as the eye could see, several giant battleships slowly moved forward. This time, the Marine Fleet Admiral, Sengoku, and the Marine Hero, Garp took the lead. Can Kazan and Borsellino be trusted, Garp? Thinking of the absurd rescue message 2 days ago, Sengoku still had deep doubts. In fact, I also think it's ridiculous. They are 2 admirals. Even if they are not opponents, they shouldn't be beaten to the point where they are about to starve to death. Garp said incredulously. They are admirals, and they won't starve to death. Who knows? Anyway, we are almost there. Sengoku shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was leading the team in case of accidents, and even his old comrade Garp was involved. He was afraid that this was a trap against the marine. Uchiha Madara? When did such a guy appear in the world? This is a sign of the coming chaos. Sengoku looked at the distant sea, and his mood was particularly complicated. Powerful enemies always stand on the opposite side of the marine. 2 days ago, Kizaru, Akiji, and Uchiha Madara fought on the island. This island was extremely desolate, and there were abandoned rocks everywhere. Not to mention suitable prey, even flowers and trees were rare. The Marines' battleships were all sunk, and the food and water on board, as well as daily necessities, all sank to the bottom of the sea, so Kizaru, Akiji, and others were hungry for 2 days. There was no food on this desolate island, and the surrounding sea was extremely strange. Even fish were rare, so they could only endure 2 days of hunger. It's all because of that guy. He made me so embarrassed, hateful. On the reef, Kizaru looked decadent, and he cursed Uchiha Madara listlessly. At this moment, Kizaru was unbearable to look at. His clothes were ragged, and there were burnt holes everywhere. His lips were all cracked, and his eyes were sunken. Akiji beside him was not much better. He simply lay on the ground and took a nap. From his tired look, it was not difficult to see that Akiji was also very sad. It's reasonable to say that with an admiral's physique, even if they don't eat for a few days, it wouldn't be a big deal, but after fighting with Uchiha Madara for almost a day, both of them have already exhausted their physical strength. It's useless to complain. If we want to capture that man, at least the three of us have to go together. Akiji suddenly opened his eyes. His turbid eyes were full of tiredness, like an old man in his twilight years. His empty stomach was growling uncontrollably. The three of us? You mean to add Sakazuki? Kizaru was surprised as the scattered sunlight regained its brilliance. The three marine admirals teamed up to deal with one person at the same time, even the current Whitebeard couldn't withstand it. Aren't you overestimating that guy? Kizaru frowned, expressing deep doubts about this. Hearing this, Akiji glanced at Kizaru, then stood up and looked at the spectacular sea in the distance. His voice was filled with endless sadness. The era in front of us is more chaotic than the era of the Pirate King. Akiji's face was complex as he said to himself with emotion. Countless pirates are fighting for hegemony, but there is only one position of the Pirate King. It's not difficult to see how bloody the sea will be in the future. Do you think that we have a chance of winning against that man named Uchiha Madara? Akiji turned his head and looked at Kizaru meaningfully. Hearing this, Kizaru was silent, and after a long time, he shook his head. After almost a day of confrontation, he and Akiji were suppressed. Uchiha Madara's performance was more like a test of the bottom line of Kizaru and Akiji's strength. Looking at the miserable island, Kizaru couldn't help but feel numb and cold sweat as he thought of Uchiha Madara's strength. Rumble, at this moment, Kizaru's stomach was also rumbling, and his old face was suddenly very embarrassed. At the same time, his heart was filled with strange emotions. The experience of these days was the biggest shame of his life. The two dignified admirals were forced to be so unbearable and hungry. Kizaru couldn't help but feel angry when he thought about it. Akiji didn't care about this. Perhaps, the three of us together may not be the opponent of Uchiha Madara. He is too terrifying, and his strength has reached a point where we can only look up to him. Akiji said with fear. Ship. It seems to be a marine ship. The fleet admiral is finally here. Suddenly, Kizaru found a black dot in the distant sea, and the frustration on his face disappeared. Akiji nodded and looked at it. It was indeed a marine battleship. This time, we lost face. As the highest battle power of the marine, we actually let the fleet admiral and Garp personally come to rescue us. Am I dreaming now? Kizaru said with a smile on his face. Akiji nodded undeniably. He also felt the same way. Sometimes, he thought that this was a dream, but it was just a joke played by God. However, the flattened island, the crushed mountain, and the island where all the creatures were killed, obviously told Kizaru and Akiji that this was a cruel fact. Chapter 714. About half an hour later, the Marine's battleship finally docked on the shore. Fleet Admiral Sengoku and Vice Admiral Garp stepped onto the island and looked at the flattened island. Both of them looked at each other with astonishment. This attack seems to cover the whole island. After a moment of sluggishness, Sengoku, who recovered from his shock, said with a shocked face. It's not that he hasn't seen a large-scale attack. Kizaru belongs to that kind of attack, but it's the first time in his life to see such an exaggerated attack that flattened the whole island. Garp also nodded in amazement, his eyes were wide open and full of horror. He has fought with countless pirates, but he has never met anyone who can do such an exaggerated thing and change the geological structure of the entire island. Sorry, Fleet Admiral, we failed our mission. At this moment, Kazan and Kizaru came side by side, with guilt on their faces. Their old faces were full of exhaustion, as if their souls had been taken away, their eyes were dull and turbid. Seeing this scene, Sengoku took back the words he was about to say, and then waved his hand with great momentum, indicating that the two should go to the ship and rest for a while. From the wounds on Kizaru and Akiji's body, it's not difficult to see that they have experienced an unprecedented battle before. This world, there's another great person, Sengoku sighed, his complex tone was filled with endless sadness. Looking at the island that was almost dismembered, not to mention Kizaru and Akiji, even he had a feeling of soul trembling. Sengoku knew that the root cause of the failure of this mission was not Kizaru and Akiji. Sengoku, are you going to return empty-handed? Garp was surprised to hear the loss in Sengoku's tone. The Marine Fleet Admiral has always been the master of the hawk without seeing the rabbit. Asking him to give up the prey and return empty-handed is worse than killing him. The Uchiha Madara that Kizaru and Akiji talked about? Sengoku asked. Garp shook his head and said, I'm talking about that, devil's child, Nico Robin. Aren't you going after her? Sengoku's old face suddenly collapsed, and his tone was bad. If I knew the loss was so heavy, I wouldn't have taken Nico Robin. After that, Sengoku boarded the ship angrily. Garp's old face grinned as he looked at the fragments of the pacifists all over the place. He sighed and followed Sengoku's footsteps to board the battleship again. No wonder Sengoku was so angry. The two generals were beaten like rabbits. Even the newly developed humanoid weapon was crushed like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy. Time flew by, and 7 days of effort quietly slipped through his fingers. The latest bounty list flowed out of the Marine headquarters and spread all over the world. Most of the names on the list were emerging pirates from all over the world, including Straw Hat Luffy. In just a few hours, the news had spread to every corner of the world. He thought it was just a sparse and ordinary bounty list issued by the Marine headquarters, but a strange bounty image soon plunged the whole world into a storm. The man in the painting was tall and big, and there were all kinds of black iron rods on his body. His cold eyes looked down at the sky, and his awe-inspiring gaze looked down at everything in the world. The first impression he gave was that he was arrogant. The most surprising thing was that his bounty was as high as 500 million berries. It was as if a heavy stone had fallen into the water, setting off huge ripples. The whole world was boiling and in chaos. Pirates all over the world were talking crazily as if they had been injected with chicken blood. It's not that there are no pirates with a bounty of 500 million berries. On the contrary, there are many pirates in the second half of the Grand Line. But the man named Uchiha Madara in front of him was obviously a newcomer. His first bounty was as high as 500 million berries. Looking at the history of pirates in the past decades or even longer, it has never happened. The shock to the whole world can be imagined. A newcomer like the sea has a bounty of 500 million berries. This sky-high bounty made many veteran pirates feel ashamed, and they shouted that they want to take a look at this kid who has just entered the Tao. All in all, Uchiha Madara's name instantly became the object of discussion among pirates all over the world. Oh. Sengoku, that old man. Dustless of Mariewa naturally also received the information. Looking at the list of bounties of 500 million berries in his hand, he instantly understood the intentions of Sengoku. With the strength of Tendo Uchiha Madara, 500 million berries is indeed low. It should be 1 billion berries, or even 1.5 billion berries. White Zetsu was also puzzled by this bounty. Uchiha Madara's strength is definitely more than 500 million berries. He can easily defeat 2 Marine admirals. At the very least, the conservative starting point is 700 million berries or 800 million berries. Now the bounty of only 500 million berries is really not justified. Master, this bounty is unprecedented. From the establishment of the world government to the present, for more than 800 years, no one has reached the bounty of 500 million berries for the first time. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For the first time, don't mention 500 million berries, even 100 million berries is rare. Dustless and White Zetsu actually think that the bounty is too low. Hancock's helplessness can be imagined. I'm not talking about the bounty. Sengoku actually has a deeper meaning. Things like berries are just a concept for me. The fame and fortune of a pirate is just a fleeting cloud. Dustless replied with a deep look. Berries and reputation are trivial things. What he cares about is Sengoku's sinister plan. Chapter 715. All in all, the news of Uchiha Madara's bounty of 500 million berries swept the world in an instant like a hurricane, and all the pirates in the sea were shocked. A storm unique to Uchiha Madara swept the planet. Even the Whitebeard pirates, who recently went berserk because of the disappearance of Fire Fist Ace, who was actually kidnapped by Dustless, stopped moving for a while and became strangely silent. They were also confused by the bounty of 500 million berries. A newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries, this is the first time since the records of the world-famous pirates have been recorded. The name of Uchiha Madara remains in everyone's heart, and from then on, his every move will inevitably affect the nerves of the world, and it is extremely difficult to ignore him. However, everything has two sides. There is a saying that the higher you stand, the harder you fall. This is a truth that has not changed since ancient times. The higher you are held, the harder you fall. In fact, it is also a disguised form of flattery. Sengoku's intention is to make Uchiha Madara the object of everyone's jealousy. Pirates pay attention to fame and fortune. Uchiha Madara's sudden rise broke the conventional rules of the One Piece world. He is the first pirate in history with a bounty of 500 million berries. There will be proud veteran pirates who will not accept this, and challengers will naturally come in an endless stream. Killing a newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries will definitely make him famous. Therefore, the bounty of 500 million berries is just right, and more or less, it may be self-defeating. Today, one of the Yonko, 4 emperors, the captain of the Bigumamu pirates, Charlotte Lingling, her bounty is only 850 million berries. Increasing the bounty of Uchiha Madara to the level of a Yonko, 4 emperors, will inevitably arouse suspicion. Sengoku's painstaking calculation is useless. Uchiha Madara is just an enemy of the marine. If the target is a pirate, I will personally deal with it. In this way, Sengoku's plan to kill Madara will be aborted. Dustless originally intended to hide Madara, and only when dealing with the marine will Madara come in handy. By the way, I heard that Kizaru and Akiji are starving to death. Dustless asked with interest. Picking up the photos on the table in his hand, Kizaru and Akiji's hair was messy, their faces were dirty, and they looked thin. Obviously, they haven't eaten for many days. They looked quite similar to the drug addicts Dustless used to live in the third dimension. There is no doubt that all this is thanks to Uchiha Madara. The Super Shinra Tensei destroyed the entire island in one fell swoop. Only Akiji and Kizaru were struggling. They couldn't even find food to appease their hunger, so naturally they were starving. The Navy should try to cover up this kind of photo. How can it be published in the newspaper? Isn't this hitting their own face? Wu Chen wondered. Kizaru and Akiji's embarrassment was also published in the newspaper, becoming the contrast of Uchiha Madara. There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. Sometimes, the more you want to hide something, the faster it will be exposed. Hee hee. Baizu's face was filled with a wretched expression as he spoke. He even had a gloating smile on his face. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at White Setsu. If he didn't guess wrong, it should be this kid who exposed the news to the marine. In this regard, Wu Chen is too lazy to care about it. This is not a bad thing. Although he is also a marine admiral, the world government and the marine headquarters are not in the same bed as each other. Wu Chen is naturally happy to fight the arrogance of the marine. Since the emergence of the 3 admirals, in the past few years, the marine headquarters has been extremely high profile, often taking the initiative to attack the pirates of the New World, and the 7 warlords of the sea, colluded with the 7 warlords of the sea. Over the years, they have eliminated many vicious pirate groups. Today's New World is barely calm. At least, as long as the Yonko, 4 emperors, don't make trouble, the sea is relatively peaceful. This sudden incident is the first time that the marine has made a fool of themselves, and the protagonists are 2 admirals. The impact is unprecedented. I think Sengoku is more uncomfortable than eating a fly. In a trance, Dustless seemed to see the angry look of Sengoku, and his eyes glowed. There is no doubt that Sengoku didn't expect Uchiha Madara to appear out of thin air. The reason and motive are also inexplicable. It seems that he is just like other pirates, holding the mentality of becoming famous in the world. And the object of suffering is naturally Kizaru and Akiji. What about the movements of the Straw Hat Pirates? They should have landed on Alabasta. Dustless changed the topic to the Straw Hat Pirates. At the same time, the considerate Hancock sent a fragrant afternoon tea for Dustless to enjoy. Suddenly remembering the blue-haired girl Vivi and her father Corbula that Mariewa met back then, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange luster. It seems that he has been in contact with Crocodile. But Straw Hat Luffy was too weak and was almost killed by Crocodile on the spot. That kid survived and thought of a plan to deal with Crocodile. White Zetsu said with appreciation. Using water to deal with Crocodile, this is the strategy that Luffy came up with for the time being. Although it is very rough, it is unexpectedly effective and very practical. It can deal with Crocodile's elementalization. Kizaru and Akiji have been defeated. It seems that it won't be long before Luffy joins the Straw Hat Pirates as an undercover. It seems that everything is ready. White Zetsu heard this and nodded gently. Chapter 716. In the Marine headquarters, in the solemn and sacred conference room, the atmosphere was heavy and the atmosphere was oppressive. It was hundreds of times more difficult to breathe than usual. Looking around, the whole conference room was full of stars, and the 3 admirals were all in the list, including Dustless, who was also sitting in his seat. Beside him were Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru. However, unlike the past, Akiji and Kizaru both lowered their heads, like defeated roosters, drooping their heads, without the glory of the past. Now because of them, the Marine has become a laughing stock. Sengoku's old face was dark and gloomy. He knew that the reason for the failure of the mission was not Kizaru and Akiji, but it was a fact that they failed the mission. Sengoku was also not tolerant. As the highest general of the fleet admiral, he must be clear about public and private affairs. If he should be punished, he must be fair. Therefore, Kuzan and Borsellino were both reprimanded, and their salaries were reduced for several years. There is no need to think about it, these are all for others to see. As an admiral of the Marine, naturally, he can't dismiss them. After all, they are the highest combat power of the Marine. Boom! At this moment, a dull roar, accompanied by a blazing heat wave spread out. Looking up, Akainu's magma fist smashed the table in front of him. Crocodile, that bastard. He has violated the original agreement and stood on the opposite side of justice. I suggest that his position as Shichibukai be revoked immediately and send troops to clean him up immediately. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. Perhaps others don't know the purpose of Crocodile, but the high-level Marine officials present know it in their hearts. When Crocodile took in Nico Robin, it happened that Robin's whereabouts were suddenly exposed. Sengoku originally planned to arrest Nico Robin immediately, but he was surprised to find that Crocodile recruited her. This has indirectly touched the bottom line of Sengoku's tolerance. Shichibukai can be lawless, but there is a limit. Without thinking, Sengoku knew what Crocodile was thinking. What if the ancient weapon was taken away by the ambitious Crocodile? That's for sure. He has already violated the taboo, so he must pay the price. Sengoku's tone was extremely hoarse, and his calm eyes flashed with scarlet violence, showing the courage of a Marine Fleet admiral. This is Crocodile's own destruction, and he will not be merciful. Not only that, he had to deal with this ambitious insect immediately. Immediately issue an order to the world to revoke the position of Crocodile Shichibukai. Sengoku stood up and wrote quickly. He wrote a simple order quickly and handed it to his assistant beside him. Then he looked around. As for the candidate to suppress Crocodile, because of Uchiha Madara, his heart is still in a mess. His strength is unprecedented, and the admiral doesn't seem to be able to deal with it. The righteous sinner shall be, this time, I will complete the crusade against Crocodile. Akainu was filled with righteous indignation and was about to take the initiative to accept the task. A light, lazy voice was issued in advance. It was very simple but unquestionable. You are so diligent. It's strange, did the sun come out from the south? Garp looked at Dustless beside him in surprise, and said that he looked out of the window to see if the sun came out from the south. Not only Garp, but all the marine executives looked at Dustless in surprise. He is the most lazy in the marine. Now he is so diligent, which is really incredible. Dustless glanced at the old guy and immediately looked at Sengoku on the main seat. In that case, the task of suppressing Crocodile will be handed over to you. After a long silence, Sengoku rationally decided. Even if the mysterious Uchiha Madara appears again, Dustless's strength is enough to deal with him. Even if he can't beat him, he should be able to escape. Sengoku, this old guy. Forget it, it's better for me. Crocodile, your task is over, and it's over. With a sinister smile, Dustless has sentenced Crocodile to death in his heart. At the beginning, he just used him. Now that the purpose has been achieved, the people who should shut up must shut up forever. No matter what, we have to arrest that guy immediately. With a cold light in his eyes, Sengoku's tone was resolute. Being slapped in the face, naturally, he has to double back. Revenge has always been the principle of Sengoku. No problem, Dustless smiled confidently, his light laughter was full of casual, as if it was not worth mentioning. He naturally knows why Sengoku is so anxious. The real reason is estimated to be to make an example of Crocodile, the 7 warlords of the sea, to deter pirates. Humph. Looking at Dustless with dissatisfaction, Akainu immediately sat down. Since Dustless chose to take the initiative to attack, there is no role for him. The strength of the two sides is completely different. The giant elephant can easily step on a small mouse. Sengoku nodded. Although he was also very puzzled, he did not ask much. Anyway, the main thing is to catch Crocodile, the mastermind. Catch him? It's better to send him to hell. That eyesore of a fly should have died more than 10 years ago. With a cold mist on his face, Dustless has decided to kill Crocodile directly. He will definitely die. If he is handed over to Sengoku, he may make a boring public execution. Chapter 717. Crocodile painstakingly looked for Pluto to deal with Dustless. For such an ambitious enemy, Dustless used to let him live for more than 10 years. Now that the time has come, he will never tolerate him. I promise to complete the task. Saluting Sengoku, Dustless smiled and promised. When Sengoku saw this scene, he felt strange. He didn't know why, but he always had a strange feeling in his heart. Not only Sengoku, but other marine generals also stared at Dustless. They always felt that his words were insinuating and had other meanings. After a few words of greetings, the hours-long meeting ended. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Although Sengoku asked to arrest Crocodile as soon as possible, it was easier said than done. The journey to Alabasta alone took 7 days. Moreover, due to Wu Chen's deliberate procrastination, he still hadn't left the military headquarters even after 3 consecutive days. Is your justice so sluggish? How dare you? On the seaside of Marin, Dustless leisurely basked in the sun. His personal maid Hancock also followed this time, standing quietly beside Dustless, waiting for orders. A group of marine bosses stood around, staring at Dustless with dissatisfaction. This guy has been basking in the sun for 3 days, and even brought his maid. Where did he come to perform a task? Obviously, he came to show off his superior life. The hot-tempered Akainu couldn't hold back his temper. Although he had been beaten by Dustless, he couldn't help but ask, "Your justice is too slow. In that case, let me deal with Crocodile." Dustless glanced at him faintly, then took the goblet handed by Hancock and drank the red liquid in the cup. "I'm waiting." Dustless stared deeply into the void in the distance, and whispered. "Waiting?" Hearing this, all the Marines were stunned and looked at Dustless. Dustless was too lazy to explain to this group of people. He closed his eyes and leisurely basked in the sun. Luffy and Crocodile were already fighting. He just needed to pick up the ready-made crocodile. He couldn't run away anyway. In just 3 days, after the debut of Uchiha Madara and the 500 million berries bounty on his head, another piece of news that shook the world came out. Crocodile was removed from the title of 7 Warlords of the Sea. Everywhere in the 4 seas, as well as the New World, were extremely shocked. The Marines seemed to have been injected with chicken blood in the past 2 days, and all kinds of actions were confusing. Alabasta, the sky was filled with yellow sand. Because of Crocodile's secret interference, the Miracle City, which was originally born in the desert, was filled with wind and sand. It was a scene of doomsday, full of desolation. On the city wall, a tall man with a cigar in his mouth, his eyes were deeply sunken, his face was full of vicissitudes, he was wearing a black trench coat, and there was a scar on his face. President. It seems that our goal has been exposed, it is better to retreat temporarily. Next to Crocodile, a slender young woman suggested. Looking closely, it was Nico Robin, but because Crocodile's back was to her, he didn't see the contempt and disapproval in Robin's eyes. Crocodile was unmoved. Now that he has been exposed and the title of 7 Warlords of the Sea has been exploited, he can't give up the current plan. That man, her eyes were empty, and Dustless's back appeared indifferently in her mind. Robin's eyes were full of unshakable firmness. She secretly said in her heart, he will be able to bring my mother back to life. Wandering in the outside world for many years, Robin has been performing tasks according to Dustless's instructions more than 10 years ago, and every time she can turn danger into safety. It's like God can predict the future. Thinking of Dustless's incredible prediction ability, which was almost 100% accurate, Robin's heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Her breasts were also undulating. If you can predict the future, then it must not be difficult to bring the dead back to life. Her eyes were full of fanatical flames. At this moment, Robin's temperament was particularly hot. Even Crocodile was affected. He suddenly turned around and looked at Robin in surprise. What's wrong? Hearing this, Robin was stunned, and then instantly restored her former calmness. I think it won't take long for my dream to come true, so I'm happy. Yes. Crocodile's eyes also glowed from blankness, looking at the distant sky with strong confidence. It's just that he didn't catch the fleeting sarcasm in Robin's eyes. In the dark, Crocodile seems to have dreamed of controlling ancient weapons and sweeping the world. Of course, there is also Dustless's appearance of fleeing. Rubber pistol. At this moment, with a loud shout, a fist rose from the ground, extended without limit, and smashed directly from the bottom of the tower. That kid is not dead yet, forget it, it's not too late to kill you this time. Crocodile looked down at Luffy and others under the tower with a contemptuous smile at the corner of his mouth. Looking at the incoming fist, he was even more disdainful. I can elementalize. How can this kind of casual attack be possible? The arrogant laughter didn't stop, and Crocodile was ruthlessly smashed. Looking closely, Luffy's rubber fist was dripping with water. Chapter 718. Robin looked at Crocodile with pity, and her beautiful eyes were somewhat sympathetic. This idiot seems to think that only armament hockey can subdue him. Caw, Crocodile, who was caught off guard by Luffy, fell to the ground like a meteorite, splashing a lot of dust. Because he didn't react in time, his face was covered with dust. Bastard, a half-baked person who can't use armament hockey can touch my body, is this water? His face suddenly solidified and he touched the water stains left on his wound. Crocodile was stunned and his mind was blank for a while. Such a strange situation is the first time he has encountered it. President, be careful of that rubber kid. Seeing that Crocodile didn't wake up, Robin roared with an anxious expression, and even because she was too excited, her tone was filled with unprecedented sharpness. Boom! Despite the first reaction, Crocodile's face was hit head-on and his body flew out. With a loud bang, the ancient city wall suddenly collapsed and burst. That's all. On the surface, Robin pretended to be worried, but in her heart, she disagreed. Although this crocodile is a top force like the Shichibukai, his vision is completely different from the young master's. He is like a rag picker, spitting out her tongue. Robin's heart was merciless. Sometimes in order to cooperate with Crocodile, she has to work hard to be ignorant and obey Crocodile. Her inner entanglement can be imagined. Robin had once followed Dustless for a period of time. She was the complete opposite of the ignorant Dustless she used to be. Her knowledge of all aspects was extremely comprehensive, and she was even more familiar with the weaknesses of nature ability users. In addition to armament hockey, the weakness of the attribute is enough to deal with. Luffy used this as a basis to find Crocodile's weakness. Looks like it's just as young master said. This seemingly careless brat actually has a wise side to him. Above the tall building, overlooking the confrontation between Crocodile and Luffy below, Robin's beautiful face showed appreciation, and she was quite surprised by Luffy's wit. At the same time, the scuffle between Crocodile's subordinates and the Straw Hat pirates under the city wall also began. After a short thought, Robin was about to help Crocodile. After all, she was still Crocodile's subordinate and couldn't turn a blind eye. Ka. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet cracked. White Zetsu broke out of the ground. He looked at Robin, indicating that he should not act rashly. Young master, do you have any orders? Robin asked calmly. His eyes were as calm as water. Apparently, she was already used to this scene. Over the years, her communication with Dustless was almost always through White Jew. Just pretend, and then wait for Straw Hat Luffy to defeat him. White Zetsu glanced at Crocodile, who was suppressing Luffy, and said calmly. Dustless's order was like this. Let Dustless defeat Crocodile. After the matter was over, Dustless would come over in a marine battleship and kill Crocodile, which was equivalent to completing the task. Luffy? You mean the boy with the straw hat? Hearing this, Robin's eyes flashed with surprise, and immediately her delicate face surged with disapproval. She said bluntly, I don't think that Straw Hat Kid is Crocodile's opponent. He is one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Even if he is worthless, he is the strongest of the strong. It is impossible for him to win against Crocodile with a bounty of 30 million berries. Robin made a serious analysis. Whether it was the situation on the scene, past records, or combat experience, Crocodile was better than Straw Hat Luffy. All in all, this was an unequal battle. Is it? But this is what that person means. White Zetsu did not hesitate to kick the ball to Dustless. Young master. Robin's body froze when he heard that. His gaze towards Crocodile changed immediately. His eyes were filled with pity. It was obvious that he was looking at a prisoner. This woman's change is too fast. I just mentioned Dustless, Sama, and she immediately jumped ship. White Zetsu was speechless. Originally, Nico Robin was optimistic about Crocodile, but after White Zetsu said that, she immediately joined Luffy's camp. Her position was too weak. Although I don't know why the young master is so optimistic about Straw Hat. But in the past 10 years, the young master's predictions have never been wrong, so it should be true. She put down the straw hat, and her eyes were full of firmness. In short, just let nature take its course. When Luffy defeats Crocodile, you can use the Den Mushi to notify me. His voice fell, and without waiting for Nico Robin to make any response, White Zetsu's body drilled into the ground again, and like a ghost, he disappeared without a trace. Seeing White Zetsu disappearing like a gopher, Robin chose to respect Dustless's will. Now, in her world, the only living person is Dustless, omniscient, omnipotent supreme existence. Sometimes, when she thought of Dustless's incredible prediction ability in the past, Robin would be more excited than ever, like a crazy fanatic. After all, predicting the future is a divine stroke, and Robin's blind worship is pardonable. Chapter 719. Although as an archaeologist, she shouldn't judge a thing emotionally, Robin also knows that she should treat it rationally, but sometimes she can't help it. It's like being possessed. Occasionally, she feels that something can't be achieved. It's obviously an illusion, but when she thinks of Dustless, she feels it's real, and there seems to be some mysterious force driving her. Robin suddenly realized that it was as if she was living for Wuchen right now. Really? No wonder Hancock can't leave the young master. Robin couldn't help but feel speechless. She and Dustless rarely met, but in her mind, Dustless's figure often floated. Hancock and Dustless get along with each other day and night, and this experience is probably more clear and obvious. For Hancock and Robin, Dustless has penetrated into their hearts and left an indelible impression. That is, everything about Hancock and Robin has been deeply rooted in their minds. Just like Hancock, as a maid, the essence of her existence is to serve Dustless, and so is Nico Robin. Time flew by, and when they realized it, it was already 10 days later. On the blue sea, huge waves swallowed the surrounding sea at an extremely fast speed, rolling up even bigger waves. Battleships with the Navy flag cut through the thistles and thorns and sailed rapidly on the sea. And the destination was Alabasta. Crocodile escaped. The Marines there are useless, but this is just right. On the spacious deck, Dustless sat leisurely in a chair, looking comfortable with his legs crossed and shaking his right foot from time to time. His expression was full of laziness and enjoyment. Hancock beside him was peeling grapes seriously, and the person talking to Dustless was Nico Robin in Alabasta. The content is very simple. 9 days ago, as Dustless had predicted before, Luffy, who was in a small universe, successfully defeated Sand Crocodile, including his subordinates. They were all defeated by the Straw Hat Pirates. And because the previous fleet admiral deprived him of the title of Shichibukai, the defeated crocodile has been handed over to the local marine by the Alabasta royal family. However, perhaps because God took care of Crocodile, just yesterday, the insidious and cunning Crocodile escaped. This time, Crocodile didn't rescue his former subordinates, and only Robin followed Crocodile to the end of the world. Because of Robin's obedience to Dustless, she was not caught by the Straw Hat Pirates. She had been secretly watching the situation. When Crocodile jumped out, Robin continued to follow him, or it could be said that she was monitoring him in disguise. Sometimes some smart guys always do stupid things that make people laugh. That guy. He gave up the opportunity to step into heaven, instead, he stepped into hell. Stupid. Nico Robin on the opposite side of the den Mushy frowned slightly. She couldn't understand Dustless's words because Crocodile had escaped. Because of my delay. Sengoku has sent Kazan to meet Crocodile in advance. If he can be caught, with Kazan's character, he will definitely be locked and impelled down to save his life. It's a pity that Crocodile escaped. If he killed him, it would be his own fault. Dustless explained sarcastically. Some people always think that they like to be self-righteous, but in the end, they lose their lives in vain. Crocodile is like this now. It's better for him to be caught peacefully. Now that he has escaped, Dustless can just find an opportunity to kill him. Keep an eye on Crocodile. In about 2 or 3 hours, I will arrive at Alabasta. Looking up, staring at the sea fog in front of him, the outline of the city could be vaguely seen. Dustless whispered, and at the same time, his eyes were shining with a cold light. If Crocodile makes an unwise move, I mean some of his unexpected moves, you will kill him instead of me, Robin. Dustless is still on his way to Alabasta, and compared with the diligent Akiji, he is too far behind. At this moment, Akiji is probably in the palace of Alabasta, drinking afternoon tea with King Corbula. No problem, master. Robin in front of the den Mushy vowed with a charming smile on her face. After following Dustless for a while, her strength is definitely not worse than Crocodile. Even in some aspects, after Dustless's guidance, she is better than Crocodile. Even if her combat power is not as good as an admiral of the marine, it is enough to deal with people like Crocodile, not to mention that he is now a stray dog. Be careful. This time, Kazan secretly lurked in Alabasta. It should be secretly arranged by Sengoku. If it wasn't for White Zetsu's clone accidentally meeting him, I would have been kept in the dark. Dustless said. He is naturally not afraid of Akiji, but Robin is different. Immediately, they chatted casually. Dustless hung up the den mushi, put the peeled grapes in his mouth, and sat on the couch to cultivate. Sengoku is really despicable. Dustless muttered to himself while looking at the void in the distance. The task is unpredictable. Maybe Uchiha Madara will come back to attack. Therefore, Sengoku arranged for Dustless to go to Alabasta, and Akiji secretly lurked. It is estimated that he wants to use Dustless to attract Uchiha Madara's attention. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Uchiha Madara was just a clone controlled by Dustless. Chapter 720. Time passed quickly, and half a day passed in a blink of an eye. Alabasta used to be an oasis in the desert with charming scenery, and Cobra was also a rare king with a conscience, and the whole country showed a prosperous state of development. However, as it was targeted by Crocodile, it gradually declined and then collapsed. This group of guys, really, if the sky falls down, the tall will hold it up. The wind was blowing, and the cold wind was sweeping, mixed with dense sand, and suddenly a sigh of frustration, full of helplessness and unprecedented headache, seemed to be quite annoyed and depressed. Looking closely, there were a considerable number of Marines stationed here, and the person who made the sigh was Admiral Akiji. Admiral Kazan, Crocodile is a pirate, and the direction of his escape is estimated to be the sea. Why don't we inform the Marine fleet in advance to catch him? A military officer carefully suggested, as he didn't keep an eye on Crocodile, and the kid escaped. Hearing this, Akiji turned his head and looked at the military officer. His eyes flashed with disapproval, and then he shook his head decisively. Crocodile was a veteran pirate. It was impossible for him to make such a common-sense mistake, and almost all of his subordinates were caught, and the probability of him leaving by ship was temporarily zero. These fools really can't be counted on. Looking around, Kazan couldn't help but sigh. These people live on land all year round. To some extent, they are more like the army, and they are not skilled in fighting on the sea. Looking carefully, Akiji's face was haggard, and his eyes were abnormally cloudy, giving people the feeling of a candle in the wind. These days were like years for him, and the most unfortunate things in his life seemed to have happened during this time. At first, he was molested by Uchiha Madara, and then Crocodile escaped. What made Akiji speechless was that he wanted to capture the Straw Hat Pirates as an atonement, but the result was that Crocodile escaped. Thinking about it, Kazan felt a stomachache and uncomfortable all over his body, and he sighed in his heart. In the desolate desert, two silhouettes moved forward against the wind. They were exceptionally lonely, as if the entire world had abandoned them and looked at each other coldly. Bastard, that damned straw hat. I'll definitely teach you a lesson in the new world. An unwilling roar resounded through the sandstorm and spread to every corner of the world along with the awe-inspiring hurricane. A tall man with a broad figure and a fierce expression could be clearly seen. It was Crocodile, who was defeated by Straw Hat Luffy. At this moment, he fled like a stray dog. The plan that he had painstakingly worked on for many years went bankrupt and failed. Not only that, but he was once again wanted by the government because he lost the title of Seven Warlords of the Sea. Crocodile's face turned green at the thought of it. This place is far away from the center of Alabasta. Only God knows where we escaped to. Robin followed closely behind Crocodile. Her voice was much lighter. It seemed that she was quite happy to have survived. Escaping such a long distance, they were finally far away from the Marines and Alabasta's forces. Not bad. In this way, we've finally escaped the pursuit of those rats. At this point, Crocodile's weary face burst into a ferocious smile. Over the years, he had experienced too much and had long honed a tenacious heart. No, the president misunderstood what I meant. At this moment, Robin suddenly said. Unlike the past, her voice was a lot weirder, hoarse and gloomy. Such a place, I think it's suitable for a cemetery. Crocodile was stunned and his eyes were subconsciously scattered. The surrounding creatures were forbidden, the sandstorm was everywhere, and there was not even a blade of grass, let alone humans. It's indeed a good cemetery, but it can be, what about being the president's cemetery? At this moment, Robin's eyes emitted a cold murderous aura. She rushed in front of Crocodile and her white and tender fist was instantly swallowed by the dark armament hockey. She mercilessly smashed towards Crocodile's head. Bang bang bang, Robin took advantage of the situation to launch an attack. Crocodile was not aware of it and was directly hit. The power contained in the young fist was beyond imagination. In an instant, he was knocked down. The ground could not bear this powerful force and burst open. Cough cough cough, Crocodile in the soft sand pit spurted blood and looked at Robin with dull eyes. He subconsciously touched the wound on the left side of his face and the whole face had sunken. Because of the sudden incident, Crocodile didn't even have time to elementalize and was directly hit by Robin. "You, how dare you betray me?" Crocodile's voice was hoarse and low, like a dying beast, and his eyes were instantly swallowed by blood. "I didn't expect you to have armament hockey. I underestimated you." "Betray you? What a load of nonsense. Robin is always my man. As my subordinate, you can't even use armament hockey. My subordinates should be omnipotent." In the sandstorm, there was a distant and strange voice. Crocodile was stunned and his eyes subconsciously looked around. There was no one around. He couldn't think it was an illusion. A gust of wind suddenly came from behind. Crocodile subconsciously turned his head and saw Wu Chen with an indifferent expression. Of course, there was also his maid Hancock. Chapter 721. Dustless's appearance immediately aroused Crocodile's vigilance. He stared at Dustless with cold eyes, and his whole body was uncontrollably erect. For Dustless, Crocodile had a deep fear in his soul. More than 10 years ago, he was beaten by Dustless. The scene of him being beaten like a bug without any power to fight back still played in his mind. It was precisely because of Dustless that Crocodile would try to become stronger at all costs. Even because the pressure from Dustless was too great, he had the idea of ancient weapons. Everything he had today was thanks to Dustless. "Hey! Don't stare at me so fiercely." Seeing Crocodile staring at him, Dustless pretended to be afraid and hid behind Hancock, revealing half of his head, and looked at Crocodile timidly. "Young master. You." "Forget it, young master always likes to tease others like this." Hancock turned her head and looked at the fearful Wu Chen silently. Her beautiful face outlined a soul-stirring smile, which added a bit of enchanting charm. "This little girl is getting more and more beautiful." Wu Chen shook his head and sighed with emotion. His eyes were dazzled for a while. Hancock's seductive aura was not deliberately faked. After eating the sweet fruit, her temperament changed. It was full of this kind of seductive charm that could make people commit crimes. In short, this was not her fault. "You guys," seeing this, Crocodile's old face suddenly fell. A person's face was a tree's bark. Dustless ridiculed him like this. Crocodile, who had always valued self-esteem and honor more than his life, felt cold. There must be a bottom line to despise people. For world peace, you don't have to go anywhere. You should die in peace. I feel that this place is the most suitable for your cemetery." Dustless chuckled. Looking around, the wind and sand were all over the sky, and sometimes sandstorms passed by. This was a natural cemetery. Even if there was no coffin, it would be covered by this violent wind and sand. Hearing this, Crocodile just smiled disdainfully, and his eyes were filled with madness and hysteria. Over the years, he has worked hard. Compared to the past, he has improved with the change of the dimension. "Do you still want to resist in vain?" Robin asked with an unkind face. "Resistance is necessary. When have you seen a crocodile who will wait for death? The more dangerous the environment is, the more powerful his combat power will be. This is all because of his survival mentality. Dustless said lightly, but the word resistance is wrong. This is just a one-sided annihilation. There is no resistance. Unilateral annihilation? Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Crocodile roared madly and lost his usual calmness. His cold eyes stared at Nico Robin. For her, Crocodile's hatred index was even higher than Dustless. Over the years, she has been careful. She did not expect to be defeated by a former subordinate. This made his proud heart unbearable. You can't even deal with a guy like Straw Hat Luffy. I advise you not to resist the young master, and let your head be taken off and die peacefully. Robin said coldly, her words full of murderous intent. You called him young master? Pointing to Dustless, Crocodile asked with a pale face. Only then did he suddenly realize that this deserted desert was led by Robin. Now it seems that he has become a turtle in a jar for Dustless. And Dustless can appear in this desert, indicating that Robin and Dustless have passed through in advance. I have treated you well, why did you betray me? Crocodile's eyes were locked on Robin as he gritted his teeth and asked. Even because of excessive anger, his mouth was full of visible blood. Everyone hates traitors the most. Boring. Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. In his eyes, this is just a manifestation of dispelling fear. Now that he is in a desperate situation, pirates like Crocodile have a fear of death. He hasn't completed his mission yet. How can he be willing to die? Dustless doesn't care about Crocodile. This kind of small character is not worthy of him to do it himself. He just gave Robin and Hancock a look. This means that Hancock and Robin should solve it. The two women looked at each other and didn't talk nonsense. They turned into a hurricane and roared out. The target was Crocodile. For Dustless's orders, they will follow them like God's orders. At the same time, there are amazing changes on the other side. Although Akiji carelessly let the Straw Hat pirates slip away, he accidentally heard the traces of Robin and Crocodile and quickly took a group of Marines to the desert where Dustless and others were. As for who told Akiji, it was a passerby. Crocodile, a famous pirate in the world, has been talked about by the world for decades, and he has recently become the hero who saved Alabasta. It's hard to forget him. After Crocodile's conspiracy was exposed, he became the collective enemy of Alabasta. Everyone wants to get rid of him. Seeing that the admirals are looking for him, naturally, they will not hide it. Water can carry a boat or overturn it. Crocodile tried to use these civilians and these people are enough to drown him. Chapter 722. A just cause enjoys abundant support, an unjust cause finds little support, this is an immutable truth. Crocodile has offended as many people as the stars in the sky. His own strength is useless, which naturally leads to his destruction. At the same time, he was targeted by Dustless and Kazan. This is his own fault. In an unknown desert, yellow sand filled the sky as three figures intertwined with each other. The chaotic battle between them created a large vacuum area. Even the air within a radius of 100 meters had become abnormally hot due to the fluctuations from the intense battle between the three of them. The raging yellow sand detoured. Boom! Puff! With a dull sound, a black shadow flew out. Looking up, it was Crocodile who was hit by Hancock and Robin. Perhaps it was because both of them were women and they were both Wu Chen's subordinates, their cooperation was exceptionally intimate. Their smooth and flowing movements were flawless and full of a kind of alternative artistic feeling. Their elegant posture and skillful fighting skills were pleasing to the eye. Boom! Crocodile was blown away, and the soft sand was naturally destroyed. It splashed up like a wave, and the wind and sand were about 2 or 3 meters high in the air. After wandering in the sea for so many years, you haven't changed at all. You seem to have become a lot smarter. It seems that you have focused on conspiracies these years and forgot to improve your strength. The contempt in Dustless's eyes was clear, and he immediately understood Crocodile's intentions. This guy wanted to defeat him with external forces. It was just a daydream. Don't talk nonsense, don't be complacent. Crocodile, who stood up in the sand, roared. His roar was sharp and made people involuntarily have goosebumps. This guy still refuses to give up at this point. His willpower is tenacious. Hancock frowned and was a little surprised. Robin also nodded undeniably. She had been undercover for many years. She knew that Crocodile's will was comparable to steel. If she wanted to completely destroy him, she must have enough strength. Following their line of sight, Crocodile was dripping with blood. His whole body was filled with a strong smell of blood. His bones were also showing signs of being dented. This was all thanks to Robin and Hancock. Dustless would instruct the two women when he had time. Especially his personal maid, Hancock, was the most amazing. She was even able to fight with the generals. Robin was not as good as Hancock, but her strength was infinitely close to that of an admiral. Crocodile's disadvantage was extremely obvious. Now that the two women joined forces, they were inevitably humiliated and beaten. Even so, the dignity of a great pirate still supported Crocodile's will. Crocodile did not give up. What a stubborn fool. He should have just surrendered. Why did he have to end up like this? It's useless to resist. In the end, he still can't avoid the fate of death. Wuchen didn't understand and was puzzled. The current Crocodile was completely showing off his courage. Venting his anger in vain was just a manifestation of his powerlessness. It was just a deathbed struggle. According to the current situation, Crocodile, who was at the end of his rope, was still planning to turn over a new leaf. Desert storm. Seeing the opportunity, Crocodile's eyes emitted a cold light. He waved his hands and a raging hurricane rushed out of his hands. Because this place was a desert, it had a geographical advantage. This high-density sandstorm seemed to have eaten hormones and instantly expanded dozens of times, turning into a hurricane that swept away the world. Whiz whiz whiz, the hurricane rotated at high speed, like a divine pen, and the sharp storm that was thrown out was as sharp as a knife, and the sand that was affected would show a long and narrow knife mark. However, this destructive storm passed quietly from the side, avoiding Robin and Hancock. The target of the attack was Dustless, who stood indifferently behind them. You are not here to sightsee, and you are not here to see me make a fool of myself. Fight seriously. Crocodile shouted loudly, and then suddenly waved his big hand. The sandstorm rotated several times faster, and the range was the same. In the blink of an eye, it expanded more than 10 times. It directly swallowed Dustless into his stomach. Master! Robin and Hancock saw this scene and screamed out in worry. They did not expect Crocodile to be so despicable and cunning. He ignored the existence of the two of them and directly attacked Dustless. This is a big gift I prepared for him, no need to thank me. Ha! Crocodile was overjoyed and laughed crazily. However, at this moment, in the center of the hurricane, a golden halo suddenly rose and Dustless's voice was heard. It was as plain as water, but it sounded harsh to Crocodile. To be fair, after so many years, you can still think about me all day and prepare a big gift for me, I am very happy. But, you actually used such a vulgar move that can be destroyed with a wave of your hand. You are as ignorant as Mariehua's brat back then. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The insignificant insect of the past has become a giant in the ocean, yet you are still so unbearable. Ao 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 ao. In the storm, a terrifying roar came out, as if an ancient god had broken out of the seal, roaring unscrupulously and full of joy. Then, in the tornado-shaped sandstorm, a mighty giant could be vaguely seen. The ferocious Tengu armor was clearly visible. Chapter 723. The ferocious Tengu armor, the mighty body, the head on the sky and the feet on the ground, made Crocodile sweat. His soul trembled when he was swept by the terrifying giant eye. Boom boom boom, the towering giant raised his blade and swung it down. The tachi of light swept out, and a tyrannical wind shot out from the tip of the blade. The massive sandstorm that was about to annihilate the world disappeared in an instant. The heavens and earth were solemn, as if even the heavens were afraid of the ancient giant. The silence was as still as water. They were like insects that could be easily suppressed, trampled, and destroyed with a wave of his hand. His pupils widened as he looked at the giant. Crocodile stopped breathing and his heart stopped beating. For a moment, he was motionless like a sculpture. Short-sighted, what you saw before is just the tip of the iceberg. Raising his eyelids and looking at Crocodile with pity, Dustless's sarcasm disappeared in a flash. Pluto's weapon only exists in legends. It is unrealistic to use him to defeat Dustless. Legend has it that the fight between the two is enough to annihilate the world. At the same time, seeing Crocodile's sluggish expression, his body full of loopholes and flaws, Hancock and Robin looked at each other and nodded at the same time. Immediately, they roared out like cannonballs. Boom boom boom, the fragile desert ground suddenly exploded, and a bottomless black pit suddenly appeared on the desolate ground. Crockett was lying in it, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. His heartbeat is unusually weak. It seems that he is running out of oil and is infinitely close to the end of his life. Perhaps an ordinary civilian can kill this ferocious crocodile. I didn't expect the little girl of that year to be so unprecedented. I'm afraid that even a Marine admiral can only return without success when he meets the cooperation of the two of you. Removing the shocking Kinsusanu, Dustless was like a breeze, quietly falling between Hancock and Robin, and his thin hands like willow branches wrapped around the waists of the two women. Immediately, he stared at the half-dead crocodile in the deep pit and looked at the broken corners of his clothes scattered around him, and his left eye turned extremely. Heavenly hand power. In an instant, space and time were reversed, and the world in front of him was different from before. In the blink of an eye, he crossed the layers of space and came in front of Crocodile. Hancock and Robin looked at each other and could see the horror in each other's eyes. It was just a blink of an eye, but they were shuttling through space. Immediately, they were shocked to feel the tender little hand on their waist, and their faces turned red, but they did not resist. After 10 years, all the grievances in the past had been erased. Now, Dustless was the only person Robin and Hancock were loyal to. The present Wu Chen was just their everything for the rest of their long lives. Cough, 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 Dustless crocodile, 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 and crocodile, crocodile, and looked at him. Crocodiles, Dustless. Was Dustless. So that's how it is, Crocodile laughed at himself. He knew that God didn't need to be angry or happy. He just needed to watch his ugly and clumsy performance to please him. You are still so young, it seems that time has not left a trace on you. Crocodile bowed his head and said in an unusual tone. Looking up, Wu Chen's appearance was still the same as it had been 10 years ago. There was no difference between him 10 years ago and 10 years later. They were completely carved from the same mold. Because I have struggled out of the shackles of time, and become the only one among human beings. Recalling his life, Dustless's tone was quite emotional. The sea turned into mulberry fields, the stars moved, and all things in the world could not resist the corrosion of time. So far, only Dustless and Kagaya have jumped out of it and become the rare surpassers in history. This endless journey, now only Kagaya and he are going hand in hand. The next time is to find the way to immortality for other confidants. If you didn't betray me, my plan wouldn't have failed. It's all because of you, Nico Robin. Crocodile screamed. Due to his excessive anger, his pale face regained its rosy color before his death. At this point, you're already at the end of your rope, yet you're still so hysterical. Who do you think has been controlling your life for the past 10 years? Is everything really accidental? It's a big mistake. It's all inevitable that I wrote the script for you. The corner of Dustless's mouth raised. He ignored Crocodile's absent-mindedness and said in a low voice, You think you recruited Robin, stupid. All of this is the result of my deliberate arrangement. Including you, you are secretly controlled by me, but you are too arrogant to realize it, thinking that all of this is the product of your own wisdom, naive. This is just an opportunity for me to arrange Robin to sneak into the Straw Hat Pirates. Dustless told the truth indifferently. Impossible. Do you really think you are a god and can perfectly predict any details of the future? Crocodile roared in disbelief as he thought of his years of hard work. Looking up, he tried to find a lying expression on Dustless's cold face, but Dustless's expression didn't change and he always maintained a calm look. Looking at Crocodile's eyes, he was full of sympathy and pity. For such a person, Dustless disdains to lie to him. It's just a simple waste, that's all. Chapter 724. Crocodile tried to hide his panic. No one wanted to be someone else's pawn, especially someone as arrogant as Crocodile. He can use others, but others can't use him. Stupid, you always seem to like to be smart and think that you are omnipotent. Glancing at the struggling Crocodile, Dustless's heart was full of disapproval. This kind of person is always centered on himself. He can calculate others, but he can't calculate himself. Do you really think this is all a coincidence? Dream on. After a deep glance at Crocodile, Dustless said meaningfully. What do you mean? Staring at Dustless's eyes, Crocodile suddenly realized that something was wrong and his face changed greatly. Don't tell me dash. Looking at Robin's disdainful face, Crocodile's expression changed greatly. Since he contacted Robin, his whereabouts began to be gradually exposed, so that now everyone knows about it. It seems that you are not stupid, you can still be saved. Seeing Crocodile's expression, Dustless couldn't help but nod and whisper, I ordered Robin to deliberately expose her whereabouts, to attract Marine's attention. Marine's high-level officials are not idiots. They are all shrewd old foxes. Crocodile is an ambitious Shichibukai, and Nico Robin is the only person in the world who can interpret the poneglyph. The two sides came together to premeditate something. The old fox Sengoku will naturally not let Crocodile go. You bastard. I will definitely tear you into pieces. Crocodile roared angrily. He boasted of being smart and peerless. He didn't expect that all this was led by Dustless. His heart beat violently uncontrollably and seemed to break out of his chest. His cold eyes were full of blood, dense like a spider web. In the dark, Crocodile's body seemed to be floating with blood mist. The cold murderous intent froze the space, and some moisture contained in the atmosphere was condensed into ice dregs. What's your purpose? Forcibly suppressing the burning rage in his heart, Crocodile asked in a gloomy and hoarse voice, You planted the traitor Nicole Robin beside me for the ancient weapon, Pluto? Crocodile was not a saint. Being used by others, he would naturally be angry. Ancient weapon? Perhaps, but that kind of thing is dispensable. Dustless looked at the distant void and said casually, It's not that I don't have any so-called dreams in my life. If I have to force myself to find a goal, it's actually very simple. Perhaps you'll find it laughable. I just want to roam the clouds freely, that's all. When Wu Chen's words fell, Robin and Hancock looked at Wu Chen in confusion. They didn't seem to understand the meaning of his words. Their eyes were full of confusion and hesitation. In your dreams. Crocodile sneered and denied after a brief moment of absent-mindedness. Strolling in the clouds, these four simple and casual words contained a monstrous ambition. Since ancient times, there was only one kind of creature that could walk in the clouds and see the sky as their backyard. It was as if they were strolling in the courtyard and overlooking the masses. God! Crocodile sneered and tried to hide his panic. Thinking of all the past experiences, now he finally had an epiphany. In the past, Dustless didn't take anything seriously. Everything was just a show to please him. Dream? What do you think is the difference between humans and God? Strength, status? In reality, it's not. Wu Chen turned a deaf ear to Crocodile's question. He raised his head and stared at the void in the distance. His awe-inspiring and deep eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the layers of voids and point to the bright Milky Way in the depths of the vast universe. The world in front of him was just the second stop for Dustless. The vast universe was his journey. God is a plaything, but humans are fighting for every inch of land. First of all, there is a huge contrast in thinking. Throw away the old vision of the past and try to stand on a new high point to overlook the world. You will suddenly feel that the world will be a lot more interesting, but you, who are about to die, can't understand this feeling. Dustless just smiled at Crocodile's ridicule. He didn't need to explain to a dying person, nor did he need to waste his breath. It would be too ungentlemanly to argue with a dying person. He raised his thumb indifferently and gathered high-density photons. This weak light seemed soft, but it made Crocodile, who was on the verge of despair, feel a fatal threat. The light beam was enough to easily penetrate him. Go to hell. As soon as his voice fell, a ray of light shot out. The sharp flash of light was extremely strong and unstoppable. It easily cut open Crocodile's abdomen, and a scorched black hole suddenly appeared in his lower abdomen. There was a stench all over. The hole in the chest was where the heart was. It was a fatal blow. Crocodile's breath was extremely weak in an instant. His face was as pale as paper, and his eyes were blank. It seemed that he used his last moments to recall how short his life was. Let's go, his heart has been destroyed by me. Even God can't save him. Leaving only a sentence in the sky, Dustless and his servants turned into a breeze and floated away. In this deep pit, there was only Crocodile, who would die in a moment. The barren desert was isolated from the world. It was self-evident what awaited Crocodile. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.